flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, orders from the assembly. I have Gary.
Obviously, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think the overlay plan is a good idea. The last meeting, Paul, they said about $8,000 to get a third party to look at it, and you said decisively that you wouldn't spend $8,000. I figure it's an $88 million project. With them making just 20%, they'll make $17 million on it. I can't see why you wouldn't spend $8,000 to take the time to try to get it right. Paul Jr., you told me that you worked construction for a very long time. Do you work in the field or do you work in management?
I work in the field.
In the field. Even though you're in the field, I'm sure you're aware of working with developers. They're gonna try every angle they can. They're in it to make money. The only reason they're doing this is to make money. And so they're gonna try every angle they can, and I think you guys need to protect yourself extremely well. Gary said that the road that goes up to Highcroft, that they're giving that to the township because they didn't want the homeowners association to block it off. That set a huge red flag off to me. If the homeowners association could do something like that, I think there's a problem with the ordinance. So, does that make sense? You look questioning.
I don't understand what you mean by that.
If the homeowners association has possession of the road, they can block it off. Is that true?
Well, the homeowners association would take responsibility for the road. If they're paying for it, they wouldn't want extra traffic on it. That's the reason.
So they could blame, well, the ordinance could avoid that. So that's them taking advantage of you. And you're allowing them, and you're happy with it. That's
No,
my
I'm not
opinion.
happy. What I'm happy with is sooner or later, the property's gonna sell, correct?
Correct.
So
But it
I
does
would
not
rather,
have to have, this is not required, it does not need an overlay.
I
It
would
is
rather
zoned.
see a development than commercial, that's all I'm saying.
What's that?
I would rather see a development over commercial.
Okay, so then shouldn't you take the time to go to the third party and try to get it right?
I think this
An
plan,
$88 million
is
project.
pretty good. This plan does offer mixed residential with some commercial along Main Street.
Yeah, but that's what they're presenting to you. You haven't had someone else look at it. So,
Why do I need someone else to look at it?
because the only thing you're taking is what they give you. You're just taking a platter that they're jamming down your throat, and you're smiling and being happy.
I'm not smiling being happy. I mean, this is something that we think out. It's not something we just jump at, make a decision about.
Well, I don't see it that way.
I mean,
And like I
honestly,
said,
this
the
has
road,
been-
think
this has been
about
going
that
on
road.
since 2017, okay, with the whole warehouse thing. So we've been thinking about this since then.
The zoning has never been changed, though, never been fixed. And this was your opportunity to fix the zoning.
Yes.
Rather than doing an overlay. So,
Can we ask for these people to also reside too when they give their names?
Yes. Okay, Terry Robinson.
I reside at the airport in a hangar for the last 23 years. I think I answered that last time. I voiced concern last meeting about a rapid move by this board to rezone and approve the Burke's plan. I and others are here to voice our opposition to this plan and your handling of this proposal. You are ignoring former supervisors who were not convinced that this plan was good for the township. Of course, that's why you brought two more in and thought, we'll just push this through. From us in the seats, that's exactly what happened. We're just gonna ramrod it through, and here we are, fourth meeting of the year. Two newbies on the board, and where are we? You're ignoring 400 signatures of residents, people who work here in Caernarvon, and Twin Valley taxpayers. That's who's on the petition that we handed you to say that the Burke's proposal is wrong for this land and the township. You're ignoring your own planning commission. No, you're not ignoring them. You body slammed them. You took the responsibility away from them because they couldn't read blueprints. They're taking too long. what, to do something right? You attacked their intelligence by saying no other person was needed to approve this Burke's plan, Paul, when they asked to hire a consultant because you don't need any more information to approve this proposal. So why do we need a consultant? You slammed the Planning Commission. You attacked their intelligence. You ignored the Burke's plan, the 2020 comprehensive plan. Oh, they only spent millions of dollars to development, but oh crap, yeah, we don't have to listen to that. That's just that. I can't say much, Paul Sr. and Keith, because I haven't had a chance to get to know you. But Paul, I've watched you for almost 2 years. I've listened to you make comments on the Burke's plans and on the property. And Paul, honestly, I thought you were a salesman for Burke's. You would answer questions of the audience for them. It appears to me, and to some of the others, that you have some vested interest in this project. You insult people who sit next to you on the same board. You insult people who have committed themselves to doing what's right in this township. You work at getting any differing opinions shut down. It just seems from your reactions, Paul, nothing else, that you've got some skin in the game. We're asking you to give the Planning Commission back their responsibility and respect them, and they deserve to be given the opportunity to rewrite the zoning and to revise and look at the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, next. I can't read the name.
Sorry, it's Virginia
Okay.
Ryder. I came after Terry. Hi again, everybody. I know you're going to make decisions based on your background, and I trust that. Well, Vice Chairman? Vice Chairman. It seems to me, as a part of the community, staying out of everyone's way, because I do trust that when you've been chosen, you're making decisions for my children, my grandchildren, everyone's. I don't consider it your responsibility to protect the Bylers. I understand that the Bylers want to sell their property, and I respect that they want to take care of their investment of life in the way they see fit. I respect that, but that's not our decision. That's not, in my mind, that's not your decision make. Your decision make is to look at plans with your experience, listen to the Planning Commission, because they were chosen to look at plans, evaluate, is everybody joyfully happy about this and ready to commit my future and your kids' futures to it? And if that's the case, it's a go. I don't see it that way right now, gentlemen and ladies. I see it that there's discord, and this discord is going to present itself every day for the rest of all our lives. And yeah, I hear what Terry's saying too. I hear that $8,000 compared to whatever. If you're all in agreement with your Planning Commission and your community is behind you, bravo. You've done your part. You did your due diligence. I don't feel that way. And I wanted you to know that before you take your vote.
Okay, Alan?
Alan Steyer, Caernarvon Township. Yeah, basically, the Planning Commission spent about a year on this last year. And in about October, we voted and came to the conclusion this would be the worst thing to put on that property over there. Because we had two consultants that we interviewed. Both consultants said, if there's any doubt, don't do anything at all. Because they both said the worst thing you could do as far as cost to the community would be to put a residential property in there, residential development. And one even went as far as to say that there's studies out there that each home in there that has school-aged children will cost the citizens of the community $15,000 a year. if there's 100 of those, that's 1.5 million. That's that cushion that we've got recently from the casino blown in one decision, one bad decision. So, I mean, I would hate to see that decision wipe out the current, budget that we finally can balance more easily than we have for the last 20 years. And we finally have a cushion. And that's all I have to say.
Jennifer Stewart?
Yeah, I just thought that was an attendance list.
Okay. And
Sorry, guys.
James?
Okay, so I'm James Archer, I'm a resident here in Alberson, and I am here to present 440 signatures. These are people that we have talked to in this community that are opposed to this project. And a few weeks back, there was somebody here in the audience that for some reason felt like it was not credible. And what I would like to do to whoever it was that, shall we say, disagreed with this list, challenge them to find somebody in this list that is not a resident and point that out to all of you and all of us. That's it today. Thank you.
Okay, yes,
I would, if I may, I'd like to just say one more thing.
yes.
Thank you. And Mrs. Byler, this is really for you, because as a mother and a grandmother, I appreciated when you said, because I've taught my kids this, when you said, I gave my word. I backed away. I respected it. However, as I've been dwelling on this, I say to myself, how can I give my word when the zoning doesn't even permit me to allow this? I'm confused by how you gave your word to Burke's Homes when it shouldn't have been given yet. I just want you to dwell on that. And if you want to question it, please, I'd be happy to chat with you, but that was just my viewpoint. Thanks.
Okay, so you have your correspondence in front of you. And business. Did anyone want to go over the video yet, the procedure? Okay, really putting it off for minutes. Okay, bounce that, Joan. Overlay district zoning ordinance revised draft.
The board recalls, I asked just for an opportunity to confer with the township engineer and go through the final version of the ordinance one last time. That occurred last meeting. I've done that. If Joan wants to pull it up, I walk you through what changes occurred since you last saw this ordinance, I guess 2 weeks ago. First thing I did was include some whereas clauses at the beginning of the ordinance. We call that a preamble. It basically captures the rationale for the ordinance itself. And I basically stole the rationale from Supervisor Whiteman, who explained his thinking on why the ordinance was appropriate. So many of the key points within the preamble that you'll see now, once it's shown, are simply going to track his rationale. Maybe it's a little more legalese. But that's essentially it. I don't know if you want me to read them verbatim, but the whereas clauses have been enhanced. Basically, to point out the fact that based on studies presented to the board, there's a high vacancy rate in the area for existing commercial retail uses. There's a dearth of affordable housing within the area. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a shift away from retail commercial that needs to be recognized, and therefore you're deviating from what your prior comprehensive plans set forth. So that's those whereas clauses right there in the front, so that's new. The title of the overlay district, I changed slightly just to reflect what it truly provides. We've been calling it a residential housing overlay district, but commercial is required as part of the residential, so it's more mixed use. And so I've inserted the phrase mixed use so that the title of the overlay district is more accurate as to what it would permit. We then incorporated a couple of changes from the Berks County Planning Commission review letter from back in July. The first several, as you'll note there in my comments, I cite to the actual part of the Berks County review letter that's revisions being generated for. These are just stylistic. They had suggestions on moving certain provisions from one section to another section, but the substance is exactly the same as it was 2 weeks ago, so there's no substantive change, just section numbers would be different here, and it's consistent with what the county recommended. On the permitted uses, the one thing that I did not include from the engineer's recommendation 2 weeks ago is he suggested that with the uses, we narrowly tailor them to what Berks Homes was presenting. And for example, Berks Homes is not proposing semi-detached dwellings or two-family detached dwellings. From a legal standpoint, I do not view that as necessary because this ordinance is zoning district-wide. It's not intended to only permit Berks Homes this avenue. It would apply with equal force to any other landowner. And so it's conceivable that some other landowner would want those dwellings. So the only reason why you want to strike them is if you found one of those uses to be offensive to you. For example, early on in this process, multifamily apartments were part of that list. And there was objection at the planning commission level, and that was stricken. So you do not see apartments listed there any longer. But the others remain.
So let me ask you a question. So does that mean they can then do the two-family semi-detached?
Correct. It's not part of their concept plan now, as I understand it, but this zoning ordinance would permit that change. And so again, if you are offended by two-family detached dwelling and want to ensure that neither Berks nor any other landowner would propose such housing, then you would want to strike that.
And this is all or nothing for the whole township then?
Not the whole township, but the whole
But for
zoning
the-
district. That district,
Just the IOP?
yes, where the overlay would be, yes.
Okay, because we originally weren't gonna have the single-family semi-detached, correct? The two-family detached or the two-family semi-detached? Because this two-family semi-detached is basically like a four-unit apartment.
I believe that's what Scott said, those three that he
Yeah.
just mentioned is what Scott said to strike.
So do you want to finish going through this and then we can go back
Well,
through
no,
it?
you
or-
can discuss it now.
Okay.
Those uses are already permitted in your PRD, so there's no change. They haven't been changed since the first proposal.
Right, but we're talking about the overlay
Correct.
in the IOP, so why would you want to let those in there then if that wasn't agreed?
You're saying our PRD allows it though elsewhere?
That's why it was originally in the list, because it was simply carried over from PRD. If you find one of those other uses offensive and want to strike them, you can.
I mean, I thought we were gonna stick to the detached dwellings and the townhouses,
I agree.
so I'd say strike 2, 3, and 4.
Is that a consensus then?
Yeah.
We'll do that. Moving on, I made a change to section 598F, so that's page 4, John, if you want to guys. I think that's the next revision. Oh. That's just showing where the section was cut from and pasted earlier on, so that's, again, at the Berks County PC review, so you can go down to 4, uses permitted by special exception. The county recommended that no impact home-based businesses be permitted by right. I point out that you already do that in a different ordinance. The county likely didn't know that. So no impact home-based businesses and home occupations are already provided for under ordinance 294. And that ordinance is inconsistent with this, so I struck both of those, and you can just rely on your existing ordinance for home occupations and no impact home-based businesses. They won't be addressed here. If you scroll down, Joan, I think the next page would be 6, unless you see something sooner. between, just a little bit further. Here we go, there we go. This was raised by supervisor after your meeting. He questioned the 28-foot cartway and wanted to see at least 30-foot wide cartways, at least for the two streets to be dedicated to the public. I passed that by Burke's, and just today, they said they would be in agreement with that. So there's no revision showing up here because this went out to you on Friday. But if the board is in agreement, we would change D so that it reads that streets intended to be offered to the public for dedication would be minimum 30 feet wide.
This is on the roads that's gonna be dedicated to us.
Correct, the two roads going through Highcroft and Willow Glen would be 30 feet wide, cartway, and a 35-foot wide right-of-way.
I still don't understand why we would want any roads dedicated to us. That is just future expense for us to have to pay for those roads. Why would we want it?
We already plow halfway down there, so we're gonna be a stretch going up to 23. So in
So
other
you
words, the
plow
plow comes in there,
existing-
they got to turn around and go back out again. Now they just go in and right after the other road.
And that's gonna justify all the future expense we're gonna have for any road repairs we have in there
If they're-
and maintaining those roads.
So we'll get liquid fuel money.
We'll get a percentage of
We'll
liquid
still get
fuel,
liquid fuel money.
but it's not gonna pay for the repair, for us to repair a road. They're not gonna cut us a check and say, okay, repair that road. It's an expense that we're taking on so they can have a development there. Why, I don't see why we want any roads dedicated to us.
Well, the roads in Highcroft are very narrow anyway, so it makes one complete loop with the trucks, which is nice for that, but then also, the roads are so narrow even for emergency vehicles, they can access it from this way, which would be a lot easier. But then ease of those guys coming out to the red light at a better intersection.
Well, I'm sure we can work it out that say, hey, okay, we're going through here, they'll keep the plows down and just go through. But why would we wanna take the dedication and have the repairs for the summer repairs, I mean, there's enough roads to take care of.
Water,
I don't understand.
blacktop, weeds, mowing.
I mean, we do
Sewer.
the same when we plow other counties' roads when we're going through, we keep the plow down, right? So in exchange for that, we'll keep the plow down, let them drive through, they'll keep the plow down, and everyone should be happy. And we're not trying to take one expense from
Yeah.
someone else.
Can we do that?
You can, but there's practical considerations, so
That's what I thought.
if you want Willow Glen, for example, currently it's public. If you wanna make that private, it's gonna be relocated and then it's gonna be private. You would lose the right to allow that to be a thoroughfare.
And a 30-foot product line.
And the HOA then would presumably wanna preserve the road, preserve the maintenance of the road, and cut down the number of trips from the general public that are passing through. Same with the road to Highcroft. If you and the 200 people living there have the full maintenance responsibility, and by maintenance, I'm not thinking of snow necessarily, I'm thinking about resurfacing, asphalt, that kind of stuff. You're gonna wanna make sure that your existing street's going to have a long life, and so if the general public is utilizing it, there's gonna be resistance, and so if you're going to
Okay,
require
so
that it
Willow
be.
Glen is our road, so then we keep it as is, and they build around it. Why wouldn't, I mean, why do we have to incorporate it where we're gonna have to take on more road?
That would be a solution that you could have.
So we keep Willow Glen the way it is,
Well, we
And then
can't, we
our-
have to
they
move it
have-
anyway, we have to move it because of the turnpike.
okay? But we're talking about permanent expense, I mean, we're always gonna have that expense of these roads, won't get out of it, once you take it on. I mean, didn't we learn from any mistakes from the past?
Well, a little different because this says an HOA, which would be taking 3/4 to 7/8 of the roads. We're only taking 1/4 of it, not even that.
But it's expense we don't need to take, I don't see where we need to take it on at all.
I don't see that being that big of an issue.
It's kinda like, Valley Ponds.
Yeah,
which
we own
is-
the main drag through there
That's it, yeah.
and none of the side roads.
ahead.
The next subsection E, I incorporated the engineer's suggestion on service streets. So now the language reads that the service street shall be limited to one-way traffic, and parking shall be prohibited on all service streets. To tweak that so it's clearer. The next thing wasn't specifically raised by anyone, but I caught or noticed, at least, I don't wanna imply that it's an omission. The proposed, your existing PRD does not contain what we would refer to as area and bulk requirements for townhomes, meaning minimum front yard, minimum depth or width of the townhome lots. So because it's not in your existing PRD, when this ordinance was drawn from the PRD, it also does not contain those minimum requirements. So I think options are to do nothing and leave it just as it is and as your current PRD is. If you wanted to incorporate a minimum front yard setback or lot width or lot depth, we could do that here at this point. If you scroll to page 7, Joan, we would put it in section 2, it's townhomes. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that. There are some site regulations within the townhome section already concerning the length of townhome as a group. You can see them listed there. So it's not like there's no regulations for townhomes, but if you want to enforce a minimum front yard, lot width or lot depth, we would want to write something in there. Like I said, it's not in your PRD right now. Burke's presented before the meeting some profiles of what the townhomes would look like, if anyone is curious as to that, if you want me to pass them around. And I can continue while you guys sort of digest all this. So I think the next page 8, you wanted to go.
And what's the setback on these? There's none. What's for these towns right here?
On these, I don't know what that assumption is that they're using, they'd have to speak to that. Do you guys know what these depict in terms of 20-foot yard, front yard setback? So that would be the same as the single families currently would require.
The only thing that those don't articulate is the architectural difference in the elevations. So this, the different steps.
Yeah.
So that's a 20-foot setback? How long is a pickup truck?
Anybody? How long to pick up?
Depends on what kind of pickup truck. You crew cab.
How long is your pickup truck?
19'2".
Yeah, so
With
they're
the
gonna
bumper.
go
Is
off the
there, is
sidewalk.
that 9, so is that 20 feet off the sidewalk or 20 feet off the roadway?
20.
Well, the right of ways, off the right of way, the sidewalk is about 4 feet away from the right of way, so it'd be 24 feet from the
So
sidewalk.
why wouldn't we be going with the 30 setback at least minimum?
That doesn't work on the concept plan that we've got, that's more than it is for single family homes.
That's-
It's sufficient to park a car in the garage, each of these townhomes is to have either a single
Will
or
a truck
two-car
fit in
garage.
these garages?
I believe so.
Yep.
So you could fit like a truck, 2 trucks in these garages, the height wise and everything? Gary's truck would fit in a garage.
I still think 30 should be minimum to fit sufficiently in the driveways.
Cause I'm gonna go back to what Eric said about what's in the PRD, what's not in the PRD, how wide the streets are, how narrow they are, what the setbacks are. That's typically what the planning commission does. The planning commission normally works that out. Now, I understand that we don't take this before the planning commission because there's nobody there that can read blueprints. That was the comment made.
Not by us.
Not by you, I'm just saying, that was the comment made. I read blueprints, I've been doing that for 35 years, and I sit on the planning commission. I know another gentleman that builds houses, he can read blueprints, and we have an engineer that sits right in that chair over there at every planning commission meeting, and if he can't read blueprints, I don't know why he's our engineer. So why isn't the planning commission doing their due diligence and sending it to the supervisors? If we're not gonna follow the proper course of action, then why have a planning commission? Why do I waste my time?
But I believe the setbacks are consistent with what is in the PRD.
But we're talking about the PRD, this is an overlay, this has nothing to do with the PRD.
Yes, it
Really
does.
don't.
Yes, it does.
This is an overlay, this is something totally new in our zoning, and it hasn't been going over in the planning commission at all. That has not been, we have discussed it in our meetings, but this has not gone through the planning commission, which was what the planning commission was working on, was rezoning that property. That's what we were doing. And then it got swept out from under us, and now here we are, we're voting on a development that the planning commission never really got a chance to work it out. And I sat in that meeting, and you and I have conversed about this specific thing, that I felt that I didn't have enough information to vote yes to your development, because there was a lot of questions unanswered to me. Now, that don't mean that it was that way for the rest of the board. And it doesn't mean that it's that way for this board. I'm speaking for me right now. And I still feel like there's a lot of questions that are completely unanswered. Things that aren't worked out, we're just gonna pile this right on through because it seems like a great dandy thing to do at the moment. 10 years from now is when we're gonna deal with it. And that's what I'm here by the elected people to stop from happening, to make sure maybe this development will get built exactly the way you want it built, but not today, in my opinion, because I don't think we've done our due diligence. We're not even sending this through the planning commission, and that's their job. So I don't understand that, and I'm not blaming you for that at all. I'm not blaming you for that. I'm just simply making a statement for the board and for the audience, that if the planning commission is not allowed to do its due diligence, what it's supposed to do, then why have it? What's it for? Is it just there to look good because they say you should have one? If that's the case, let's just get rid of it. I can quit wasting my time.
Am I okay to respond to Jeff Thomas?
Yeah.
With all due respect, you ask a lot of questions.
I do.
And I did my very best, and so did everybody else in our group to answer your questions. This, and our attorney can explain what the relationship is between this overlay and a PRD. We did spend a lot of time on talking about a lot of things.
We did.
We spent a lot of times on dwelling on things that, personally I thought were irrelevant. But we tried to.
Irrelevant to you, excuse me, not to interrupt. Irrelevant to you or irrelevant to our
Well, we
taxpayers?
argued for a long time that every family has 6 cars. That kind of stuff is, you know, we kind of got derailed from things. But I think we did our best to answer your questions. And what this type of community, and one of the planners that you spoke to has developed communities very similar to this. And actually, he mentioned that he did one in this township in the very beginning that had alleys and 20-foot roads, because I have the plan. And so it's not inconsistent for this type of community, and you're talking about front yard setbacks. The purpose of the front yard setback is, granted, to be able to get your vehicles off the sidewalk, unlike what you find in Highcroft. And I can explain to you why that is that way in Highcroft. It's because they have a 33-foot right-of-way from the face of curb to the back of the right-of-way is 4.5 feet. You got 4.5 feet, 24 feet, 4.5 feet. That comes to 32 if I did my math right. So by the time you get a 4-foot sidewalk, your sidewalk is right at the back of the right-of-way. So that's where your 20 feet is. That's not what you'll find on our concept plan. we're more than that, we're 24 feet, as we just said with the townhomes. But the purpose of the 20-foot front yard setback is so you have more space in your rear yard, which is what's usable for families and folks. You know, that's where they spend their time when they're outside, they're in their rear yards. And by trying to maximize the rear yard depth, and we back two buildings up against each other, you're doing your best to maximize the distance between the two buildings.
So
That's
why
why-
wouldn't you just make your properties bigger then? You wouldn't make enough money then.
You know, you keep going back to the money and, you know,
Okay,
the
but
accusations
Why
of,
wouldn't you make it bigger then?
because.
You want
of-
us to give
of
and not
Florida-
to have things right. We're the ones that have to answer to the citizens when they're complaining and they say, oh, there's no parking here, we're trying to learn from our mistakes of Highcroft and
But
Kenwood.
somebody mentioned 30 feet. 30 feet doesn't give you enough to get any additional cars. So basically, if you go to
But it
30-foot
clears them off the
setback.
it clears them off the sidewalks.
No,
by
it
car.
doesn't.
30 feet, so they can't
Well,
park in the
24 or
driveway?
30, you're gonna get all your cars are gonna be off the sidewalk if you're at 24. You know, you don't have a vehicles that would be allowed by a homeowners association in a community like that. They don't allow commercial vehicles, they're restricted out, so you're not gonna get the big commercial vehicles, the dualies and those kind of pickup trucks. 24 feet is adequate to stay off the sidewalk. If you go to 30, sure, it's gonna be further off the sidewalk, but you're not gonna gain anything, and what you're gonna lose is you're gonna lose in your rear yard. And I hear what you're saying, you say, well, just make the rear yard bigger.
Correct.
But there's another piece to this, is affordability. When we started out with this product, we never thought that the prices would be where they're going to be. And you saw it in the tax, formulas that I provided you, what the base price of a house and a townhouse is gonna be. So if we reduce, it just reduces the affordability of the lots, and I know what your comment's gonna be, you don't care.
Right, it's not our business how much money you make, I hope you make a
But
lot of money.
affordable housing, and affordability of housing is an important factor in what's needed in all of Berks County. And I think Mr. Brown referenced a study that was done, for the Economic Development Council. And we're way behind on homes in Berks County.
Now, may I comment to that real quick before we get lost? So you say in Berks County, Caernarvon Township is a tiny, tiny little piece in the very southern tip of Berks County. I talked to people from Berks County, and they said that, like Robson Township, like, in the backsides of Hamburg, at something Castle, I can't remember the name of it, but in that Burnville, in the backside of Burnville, those areas of Berks County are way, way, way underdeveloped. So when they say underdeveloped and needing homes, they're not specifically pointing to Caernarvon Township. I
That's
just
not-
wanna make that clear.
That's not how they did the study, but I don't, I don't wanna waste a whole lot of your time trying to explain that. From, how many housing units have been built in Caernarvon Township since 2008? And that's when their study was. Their study was based on the housing that was built since 2008.
Okay, what about the backyards? What's your distance on the backyard?
The rear yard setback is 16 feet,
And how about the side yards?
8 foot and 8 foot,
8 foot.
total 60.
You don't see a fire hazard if one house goes, it's gonna take down a lot of others, 8 foot houses.
It's consistent with what's in your PRD ordinance, and it's consistent with what has been done in other communities.
But just because it's consistent doesn't mean it's right.
But doesn't mean it's wrong either.
Well, if you can see a hazard there, it is. And then, you mentioned the school last time, since we're on housing. So you did that study and you said that we have plenty of room in the school. So did that include the 350 homes that are gonna be built on a 225 acre lot over in Honeybrook, that's in Twin Valley School District, that was just
What I
approved last week?
What I gave you was the capacity,
Uh-huh.
1,300, I believe it was 1,311 is what the additional capacity that the school district provided.
Mhm.
So,
Didn't-
are those included in that number? Probably not.
Since it's just And then what about the apartment buildings that are being built right here in town? How many is that supposed to be, 77?
77?
Well, a question was asked at the last meeting, 2 weeks ago, about what will yield, what a community will yield. And Nathan provided a study that was done by the National Home Builders Association. And basically, what their study said, and it was actually done by another, independent agency for them, I believe, that for every 3 single-family homes, it produces one student. For every 8 townhouses, it produces 1 student. They're not our numbers, that's
Okay.
a study that was
I'm
done.
just pointing out that 350 homes.
See, no, I'm just telling you what I'm just telling you what an independent organization that did the study produced.
Okay,
I'm not saying
okay, well, I'm
it's
just gonna
correct,
finish this.
and you obviously don't know it's correct either, so please give a little bit of respect to the
142
community.
homes on Chestnut Ridge in Honeybrook, 39 Oak Grove in Robinson, 55 Green Hills Estate in Robinson, the 77 apartments that we have. And then someone in the Twin Valley Elementary said there's 25 kids in each class in the kindergarten alone. Is that true?
I don't know, I think the one study we gave you had class size, I don't have that with me.
Is it true that we're gonna be busing children from Twin Valley School District here in Caernarvon, to Honeybrook and Gibraltar to fill classrooms at those schools?
Currently, students are bused from Honeybrook to Twin Valley Elementary Center, I can tell you, I know that's a fact. So I don't know the answer to your question.
Okay.
And is busing happen and redistricting happens? Yeah, it doesn't happen on a regular basis, but redistricting does happen. To keep demographics and student population, balanced between the buildings. Yeah, Sandy, to answer your question. Average class size, Twin Valley High School 19, Twin Valley Middle School 27, Honeybrook Elementary 18, Robinson Elementary 19, Twin Valley Elementary Center 20. Average class size, if you average them all, is 21. And then there's the average class size is calculated on actual classroom and teachers. Excluded from the calculation were professional support personnel, including but not limited to learning support teachers, guidance counselors, librarians, reading specialists, reading support teachers. So, that came straight from the administration.
Well, I would like to ask one question to the board and to the residents, to Burke's Homes. If this is such an awesome idea for our community, and it very well may be, I'm not saying that it's not, I'm not saying that it is. If it is the perfect scenario for our community, then why are we railroading this right through? Why are we in such a hurry to just get past the planning commission and just expedite this right on through real quick? If it's such a great idea, shouldn't we take our time? You get your end right, we get our end right, and everything turns out perfect for the whole community? If it's such a great
We've been working on
idea.
this since October of 2020. That's when we first came to the Board of Supervisors. So I wouldn't say we're really rushing it through. Yeah, I know the planning commission, some of you on the planning commission feel that we are. But we've been in front of, we've been in front of the planning commission a lot. And we have come back with information that you've asked for.
And a lot of times, the planning commission has told you, the majority vote, that we didn't have enough information to pass this on yet. Is that true or not true?
Well, the last time it wasn't a majority vote, it was 2-1.
How is it 2-1?
2-1. 2 for, 2 against.
I thought it was a standstill, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
because
2-2.
legally,
Yeah.
no,
Yes.
legally, my vote went to a no, because I restrained from voting at all. So it went to a no.
That may be correct, but it was, and we came to supervisors because.
Because we didn't
it was
have
a
enough
2-1.
information. I felt, I can speak for me, I can't speak for everybody. I felt we didn't have enough information. I
The
felt
first
that
thing
we
we
didn't
did was
work
a
it out
commercial
correctly
study,
yet.
the first thing we did was, we looked at this property from a commercial standpoint. Mr. Brown referenced that in the narrative of the study and what came back with the study. We knew from talking to the Bylers that they were told after the distribution warehouse, that might be incorrectly referring to it, that the direction was residential. So after we looked at it from a commercial standpoint, then we were confident that the residential is what the demand is for the property. And commercial would have been a demand for the property. I would imagine in 5 years, there would have been somebody that would have put on their agreement and would have purchased it and would have done some commercial.
And I can imagine that if residential would be such a hot ticket for that property, in 5 years, somebody would have bought it already and built houses.
I don't know if other
That goes both ways.
Yeah,
Gary.
I don't know if anybody residential has spoken to them. That would be a question.
That argument can go both ways. And that's the stuff that happened in the planning commission that I didn't feel comfortable with. That we were getting open-ended arguments, and my stand on that was, let's go back and get it right, and go from there. And if we don't have time for that, then by all means, let's jam this right on through.
And maybe they
we'll
went
deal with
away,
it later.
maybe the residential went away from it because, they didn't wanna spend the time and the effort to try and get the zoning changed.
Maybe that was the commercial excuse as well.
No, it's zoned for commercial, it's IOP allows commercial, some commercial.
So it's not zoned residential. It's not zoned to build houses on. It's zoned to build business park, right? But you're still trying to build houses there.
That's correct.
Okay, so why would
Because
another
we-
builder not want, if that's such a hot property for residential, why would another builder not wanna jump in there and try and do what you're doing in 5 years?
Because they may not have wanted to take on the burden and the challenge to try and get the zoning changed.
That's an open-ended question for both of us, to be honest. That's not it. It's
We
really
find
not
that in
it.
other areas too. I mean, we just did 3 projects in the State College area that we went through, zoning change. And the developers in that area didn't have an appetite to take on the zoning change, so.
Well, in my opinion,
I don't know I really don't know the answer to your question.
it's an open-ended question. It really is. There's really no good answer to it. In my opinion, my sole opinion on this right now, I personally do not like the overlay, because as I explained it in a planning commission, it's a steaming pile of crap covered by a blanket. And the next person that slides in under that blanket is gonna get covered in it. That's the way I feel about it. It's a blanket that we're putting over whatever we wanna call it. We'll put a blanket over whatever we wanna call it. And we'll build whatever we wanna build, and then we'll throw a blanket over it. I just think that's misfortunate for this community.
I don't know when the last time you looked at and made zoning changes to this township. My guess it was probably in 2007, when the ordinances were done. There may have been a couple little things here and there. But if you know, things have changed substantially since 2007, if what I'm saying is correct. And,
So it would behoove us to get a planner to come in here and tell us what's current.
well, a planner that's gonna be objectively looking at the township is different than a planner that's being hired to specifically stop residential on a property. So I believe that's what the guidance and the direction, knowing both of those planners, and all of us here have worked with them. I think that's why there's been such a push for the specific planner to be there, because if he's on my side, he's gonna fight like crazy for me. If he's on your
But
side,
that's
he's gonna
not
fight
true,
against.
because I didn't know who the planners were, and if there's 3 votes that wanna move forward, the planner's gonna come here to do what they want him to do what's best for the township as far as
They
making
being
it
the supervisors,
residential.
or they being the planning commission?
Well, whoever, I mean, if we
Well,
direct this,
ultimately, it
if
goes
we
before
go
the supervisors
say we
before it
get
happens.
through some of this, and we decide this should go back to planning for them to just go through it, but we're directing the plan and saying, look, we have 3 supervisors that are gonna move forward, we want your advice and your input on this, and then have it come back.
Almost everything that's in this ordinance has come through planning. The parking, the planning,
But
or
there's
the
been
plantings.
changes, right? Have there been changes?
There's been changes through the process, yes. The changes that are recent are changes that are tweaks that have not been to planning, but the bulk of the document is, you
But
guys
it's our
have seen that.
responsibility not to take your word
I'd
on
like
it,
to
it's our
say
responsibility to make
something.
sure we go
One
through.
second. I would like to ask this, so you're saying that a planner could be skewed in his vision a little bit by who's hiring him, right? Is that what you're saying? So Berks County, the county of Berks, just did a planning assessment. We finished it last year. And the county of Berks planning assessment, we asked them what they thought about this and they said no. You can skew that any way you want, but they said no. And that was a neutral planner. They were not working for you and they were not working for
And they
us.
evaluated what you sent them based on what your ordinance currently is. And we're obviously not looking, we're looking to change the ordinance in a direction that was indicated 5 or 6 years ago for use in this property. We kept hearing in your planning commission meeting, mixed use. That's what we want. We want mixed use. This is a mixed, this is a mixed,
Commercial and residential.
this is a mixed use, this is a mixed use, even by title of the ordinance, this is a mixed use plan. It has commercial, it has, multifamily townhomes.
Mixed use though doesn't, that property is not zoned for residential, for houses. So mixed use does not mean if it's 57 acres, you build 50 of them in residential and then use 7 acres for commercial. Great, mixed use. That's not how it reads. So you're asking us to put a blanket over a steamy pile of poop at the moment. Because right now, the way I read this is very open-ended. You are very indiscriminate on what, I see loopholes in here where you're allowed to do things that we definitely don't want.
For example,
The complexes, which we talked about earlier, the multi-unit, for family.
our concept plan has only had one change in it. We took out the apartments because what we heard from the community and heard from the planning commission is apartments don't work. And we came back and we've been consistent, and our intent is to build, and it's a concept plan. So by the time we get stormwater and all that, it might change some. The unit mix might, not the unit mix, the unit totals may change because of stormwater. But our intent is, and I asked Mr. Farino, cause he's is one of the equitable owners. Our intent is to build single families and townhouses consistent with the concept plan that you've seen that was prepared by a planner out of, Delaware County.
And then is it true you don't wanna do a conditional use hearing?
That we don't wanna do a conditional use hearing, but that was at the suggestion in the very beginning, was suggested to us to do the overlay.
And
And maybe.
why wouldn't we want a conditional use hearing? Is there any reason we wouldn't want one?
Well, I have a question. So our planning commission has had this for how long? Jeff, you can answer that, over a year?
It's been a year.
A year now?
November 2020
Okay,
was
so
December
if you guys
2020.
if you guys are against this overlay, why haven't you developed a plan that we could rewrite the ordinance in the past year?
So we were working on changing the ordinance. We actually have paperwork to show you that we were working on changing the zoning actually.
To make mixed residential?
That we weren't there yet. We were working on changing that to do what's best for the community. And we were at a point where we were, coming up with ideas. Eric was bringing some, Great Valley was bringing some from other areas, what seems to be working. We were trying to be our own consultants, if you will, in the planning commission to find out what's working all around us. And then we were gonna zone that correctly for those uses, what's current. And Berks Homes came in and submitted, their plan, potential plan. And it went from there, so that kind of stopped the whole zoning thing, because we didn't know where this was gonna go. So, for a little over a year, our zoning changes sat dormant because of, the consideration of Berks Homes. So, we lost over a year in the consideration of the zoning, which would have already been worked out by now. I'm sure, I can't say that to be a fact, but I would think in that year we would have worked something out.
But since 2017 though, we've been talking about a mixed residential, have we not, Alan, when you were on the board?
I don't believe that long, maybe a year and a half or two.
No, when the warehouse came in, we all struck down the idea of the warehouse, and a comment was made.
The warehouse, because it did not fit the zoning.
I understand, but when Byler's brought this here with the warehouse, this meeting room was packed more than it is tonight, agree?
Yeah.
And they all were totally against the warehouse, and they sat there and they said, well, we'd rather see a development.
Yes, but they're not on the planning commission.
I understand this, but all I'm saying is that, I know as the board, we sat there and we said, if they were to come up with a plan with mixed residential, we'd be interested in looking at it. Do you remember that?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're always interested in looking at stuff, but we
Okay.
wanna have say in it.
I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is that we talked about that as a board, before you were on the board, we talked about a mixed residential. So now Burke's Homes come before us with a plan that we talked about. And now all of a sudden we act like, what are we doing here? We don't wanna do this.
Yeah, we didn't talk about mixed residential, we talked about mixed use, like Eagle View is what we talked about a lot. in the
Which
planning
is,
commission.
tell me this plan is not like that.
Not really.
What do you mean? You have commercial,
This
you have
res-
commercial
this-
across Main Street, you got
it's mixed
townhouses going into
residential
singles, which
with
blend right into high.
7 acres thrown to commercial so they can throw us a bone, is what it is. Mixed residential would be like 50-50 commercial versus residential on the same, acreage. But we never got down to that as a plan commission because this plan came to us. And we spent the whole year, almost every meeting, working just on this.
How many people in the audience are from Highcroft? 3? What's your take on it?
Have there been traffic studies done?
There has been traffic studies, and there'll be additional traffic studies as well.
Because it's challenging just to get out of there now. And
That's
that
what
road-
we
that
definitely
road
would
is
be
even
approving with an
taken care of.
intersection.
There's so many huge potholes just in that road there to come out. School buses go on that road.
Now, will it, Glenn? You, sir? What's your take on it?
Disclosure, I'm on the planning commission, also live in Highcroft. I live with Highcroft, I chose to live there, so I bought a house there, I understand, but having lived there as long as I have, the narrow roads don't work. Parking is always a problem, you can get 2 cars in the driveway, most people don't use their garages. You can walk around the neighborhood and see that, I know most people live in the neighborhood. When we talked about the plan, that Burks had, presented, one of the concerns that we had is overflow parking. The pushback was kind of, well, we wanna maximize the plan, we wanna make sure that we have this, but, what about when the roads need to be plowed? Everyone in our neighborhood has to get their car off the street. If you have more than 2 cars, luckily there's a baseball field down there, but, it's all those practical considerations that, having lived in Highcroft, that I didn't think were adequately addressed, along with a host of others. We've talked about it for a long time because there are a lot of issues. It's not just, school, it's traffic. All the other developments that are coming around here, we're gonna have the 7 apartments and traffic stinks now. It's not gonna improve. Even with a light, you can talk about all the light timing and that you want. They're unknowns. And when it's built, it's too late, I can't address it. And then, the other thing I worry about is you have probably the ideal building lot for the entire town. And everybody wants, all these things, oh, we want a Wegmans, we want this, we want that. Once I build houses on that, it's done. Where other spots are you gonna have? It's in the main thoroughfare that you're going to put businesses.
But as a supervisor, I hear that all the time, and without rooftops, you're not gonna build demographics for a Wegmans or
I hear
a.
that from Burke's Homes.
Well, it's based on a 5-mile radius. There's a ton of developable land, like, outside of this, community, this township, that you could get those housetops from. And frankly, I don't know if just those roofs, I learned about the others tonight, but just those roofs alone would, push you over the threshold. And one of the things we wanted to have our planner come in and talk about
we wanted to get a developer in here that does Wegmans, that does these things that people want, and hear from them, what do you look for in a particular area that you're going to build in? So it's not my theory about what these guys want, it's, they're coming in and telling us this is what we want, so.
So living in Highcroft though, you'd rather see commercial there than residential?
The right mix, I mean, I don't think, like I said, if you develop it all residential or mostly
Like when you're
residential,
talking
that's
commercial,
fine.
what are you talking commercial?
Those are the things that we were going to look into, I mean, like.
I'm asking you, Alan, what are you, commercial, what are you thinking commercial? Office buildings, medical buildings, what?
It would've been perfect here, the dental establishment they're building over on the Walmart side.
And we have that zone for that, and they did get that, I mean, we have in our industrial park, but what else are you thinking? What's gonna fill up 56 acres?
I'll say,
A lot of things, one could be a Texas Roadhouse that serves alcohol, or a giant
yeah,
store
I was gonna say that.
that offers alcohol, you know what I mean?
Strip for that.
Once you get rid of that property, where are they gonna put something
But
like that?
isn't this plan right here offering a strip out front with individual lots?
10 acres, yes.
Yeah, 3 acres is probably more than what you need for a Texas Roadhouse.
And how much for a grocery store?
How much?
Oh, so 25 acres for a grocery store, so we're not gonna be able to build a grocery store there. And that's what everybody keeps saying they want in this town is a grocery store. Do you see what I'm saying? It's
Can I make a couple comments to Mr. Zerbe's comments?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, you were not in support of the project when the apartments were there. And my understanding was that once the apartments went, you would be supportive of residential. As far as the traffic, we provided you with traffic numbers several times, but 2 weeks ago. And the traffic numbers for what can be put in that area now, and some of the things you're just talking about, is far higher than what residential is gonna generate. You know, the facts are there, they're out of the transportation engineer's manual. As far as the grocery store, you say around surrounding areas, I don't know, I'm familiar with the surrounding zoning of the areas, West Namel, well, Elverson's done, but, and Honeybrook, and Lancaster, Caernarvon, Lancaster. The only place maybe is something in New Morgan that you could say that your neighboring communities can offer the rooftops. Other than that, the surrounding communities that are going to feed to this area, like for a Wegmans or for a Giant or something, they're not there. The houses you're speaking about over in Honeybrook, they're not coming over here to groceries. They're gonna go towards Downingtown. You know, the study.
How can you know that?
Because there's
They
nothing.
come over to Walmart, people that are over in Huntsbrook.
How can you know that? Because some of our residents who got petitions signed actually got people that they were talking to from New Holland, from Honeybrook, from Gibraltar. And they didn't bring their petitions in, but they spoke to them. They said that in the planning
You've done
commission
traffic
meeting.
studies in the area.
I can give you an
Where they
example,
wanna go.
Mr. Vickers, I'll give you an example of Wegmans. Just,
Okay.
I personally worked on the most recent one constructed about 2 years ago, Manhattan Township, Lancaster County, Harrisburg Place, Route 30 interchange. That site was in the works for about 5 years. And that is because Wegmans at the time didn't feel that portion of Lancaster County had enough population to support Wegmans, which Manhattan Township is a first-class township, right on the border of the city, probably one of the highest population bases in the entire state. Wegmans was on the border for that, and ultimately decided to go there after a lot of negotiation. But I will tell you from a traffic perspective, a Wegmans, from everything we've heard through most of these meetings, is it fair to say traffic is probably the number one concern we've heard?
One of the biggest, yeah.
Wegmans gave us specific data to compare to what's in ITE. Well, Wegmans generates about 1,200 trips during a single hour. That's about 6 times what we're talking about for the residential here. And that's for one use on that site.
I don't necessarily think that we're gonna get a Wegmans in our town anytime soon, period. For that reason alone.
Agreed.
Wegmans are big, that is a huge animal, and they need to feed it with lots of people. Let's just put it that way to make it simple. We don't have lots of people here. That doesn't mean that we can't get a Boyers or a an Aldi's or one of those smaller grocery stores. And now the big thing is grocery stores with alcohol. So more importantly, you might persuade, you know, a Redner's or an Acme to come in and sell alcohol and groceries. I don't know that, I'm just saying, the potential is there.
Yeah, I just keep going back to the conversation we've had on traffic, and if that is the number one concern, and I think from both the residents, planning commission, board, I think it's fair to say, if it's not number one, it's number two, but I would say it's number one. And all we keep trying to get across is that current permitted uses in the IOP, with that 56 acres, it would be 10 or 20-fold the amount of traffic if that was developed as all commercial under current zoning.
I don't think that's a great idea either, not, for two reasons. For one, the traffic, if it was an office park, I agree with you. Number two, it's outdated. I mean, it's outdated. A lot of people are working from home now. So to put an office park in would be, you'd fill a third of that probably at best at this particular point in time. So I agree with you on that. That's why I think it's important that we do the zoning, go over the zoning, change the zoning, and make it correct, make it period correct for everyone. I think it's imperative to our township, I really do. Maybe I'm crazy,
And I
but
will
I
give
think
you-
that's imperative.
I'll give you my 2 cents as an engineer dealing with, well, any given week, probably 10 different projects at a time and hundreds over the course of a year. Let's give you my take on what we're seeing as far as uses. Number one is warehouse. Number one use right now, which obviously is not an appropriate use for that site. Warehouse is basically taken over as retail. People don't go retail, you're looking at warehouse, so that's not really a use that makes sense. Number two, right behind it is residential right now. People aren't doing retail. I think it's evident by there's some sitting and it's just, like I said, warehouses replace that with e-commerce. Second to that is the smaller commercial lots you're talking about, which is provided for with the IOP out front. But in all honesty, and I'm just giving you my experience for what we see coming in on a regular basis, that's the two uses that are being developed at this point. Traditional retail, very little. Office space, very little given the climate. So it's hard when you have a zoning it's geared toward commercial right now because people aren't building it.
Well, right now, for an example, dental, medical, and I don't mean hospital, but medical, they're still hot tickets, you know, and you can't build one of them on 7 acres up next to a sit-down restaurant. It's not gonna fit. So
Well, that's
there's
not
some of
true.
the
That
things that we're
depends on what
thinking
you're
about.
talking about, because I'm, you know, there's interest for those smaller centers, and they only require 2 acres. I think that accurate. I have one more comment to Mr. Zerbe's comments about parking. Legitimate concern. Plowing, how many times plow you? 10 times? What we talked about is, if you look at the commercial portion, the IOP portion, and the parking that's required, that's where, and we can put that into the agreement that can be used as overflow parking for folks that can't use all 4 of their spots in their single-family houses, that there's snow, that they can park in those locations.
But you know I raised that question.
I know, it's a
My
legitimate
biggest
question.
concern is, what do those people on the main roadway do if they have cars, if they have to park on the street? That's why I said to you about overflow parking
And
somewhere.
after you brought that up, that we talked about that, that would be the outlet, because, you know, the parking's pretty generous, the requirements on a commercial, on whatever the uses would be in that IOP section. It's gonna be primarily the business and the parking, and that's where the overflow can be for snow events.
And I won't argue that with you, except if I'm the business owner, am I going to allow somebody else's car to be parked on my property that I'm gonna be responsible for?
If we put that into the documents, I would say yes.
Is that relieving me of any responsibility for their cars? I'm asking because I don't know.
Well, I don't know, that would be a question you would wanna ask the attorneys. I don't
Well, I'm
wanna
just
answer
saying, my concern is,
Get 'em
because
off the street.
we do it in Highcroft, they go down to the ball field, that's the only place they have to park. So I understand that. And I see it with Penwood, where we have cars that we have to get a place to park over at the playground or wherever. That's why I brought it up after I thought about it.
Well, after your comment, that's what the discussion that we had. Is that's an avenue to take care of those, how many times a year you plow snow.
Okay.
Now, one real quick question, back to the traffic. So, let's make it clear for me and for everybody. Residential traffic, I'm gonna say it leaves at 6 to 9 in the morning, and it comes back at 4 to 6 in the afternoon, and that's not exact, that's an educated guess from me. Okay, would that be fairly accurate? Okay, with a grocery store, you're gonna triple those numbers in traffic counts, but they're gonna come and go. They're not all gonna leave at once and all come in at once. There's our traffic problem. When you have 300 cars coming into Morgantown, extra on top of what's here, all at once, there's the gridlock, that's the big problem.
But what you're gonna find is that the high-intensity retail uses generate more in that, you're saying sporadic, which I agree, it's more spread out. They generate more over that spread out time periods in the peak hours than what the residential does. So, to your point, yes, residential is,
Condensed.
everyone needs well, you say condensed, but there's actually a lot of information out there now with COVID, how much that has changed. But let's plan for, in the future, if things go back to normal. Yes, you have 6 in the morning till 9 in most cases. Everyone who is leaving leaves, and then comes back in the afternoon and very low during the course of the day. But if you look at those peaks, they're for the 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon, that traffic volume is actually less than some of the midday peaks you may get from even a small grocery store, for example. I'll tell you, we just looked at an Aldi's, and Aldi's alone generates off peak somewhere around 200 peak hour trips. So I mean, yes, it's spread out, but there's
they're not
still
all
intense
200.
uses.
They're not all 200 coming at once and leaving at once.
No, that's in 1 hour, that's 1 hour.
Okay.
We actually just counted the one in Caernarvon.
I thought it's the same cars, it's the residents that go to the Aldi's. It's not new cars,
A
it's the
lot of
same,
that
it's the
is,
cars
that
that
would be a
have.
true statement.
But unless
To
you
some
live
degree.
within a walking distance, you still get in your car and drive that section of 23 that everyone's concerned with. So it doesn't matter if you're a resident or somebody outside of the area. If you don't live in direct proximity, you're still driving. So it doesn't matter if you're a resident or not.
Okay, so we're gonna get back there, but this lady. she's
Sorry.
impatient.
It's kind of rolling back a little bit, but I am 100% behind a grocery store. That would be awesome, except the casino property has been sat empty for what, a decade at least? And it was originally planned for a main store with a bunch of little stores, like 3 or 4 food places, and it just sat there waiting for somebody to take it. I don't see us,
There was bog turtles on that property.
whatever. But I don't see us filling a big store in Highcroft. And if you don't notice the in and out time periods at Walmart, I mean, people can time the best times to go if you don't want a crowd, just based on how many people come in and out of there. So there are really set, heavy time flows. And these smaller communities where I'm seeing them, like in Malvern and in Great Valley, they want a little bitty Kimberton that they can walk to that's like attached to them. And so if the zoning is there, then it's already there. They don't want a bigger, property where people are gonna come in and out and mess with their homes or worry about what's going on there.
How many homes are in Penwood?
247.
And how many are in Mill Stream? Okay, so I live in between those two developments. Is there more traffic on my road? Absolutely. Can I get in and out of my driveway? Sure. Morning rush hour, evening rush hour. I mean, developments don't dump out traffic like you're talking about just because morning rush hour, afternoon rush hour.
Well, he just established that they do.
I'm just telling you because how long's Penwood been there? 20 years?
But just to be clear on what I said, yes, residential, there's no hiding. Residential people leave in the morning, come home in the afternoon. It's obvious. But to what extent are they adding? Are you going to notice, to your point, if you say it generates 120 trips, just as a round number, that's on average 2 cars additional every minute. Is that noticeable to somebody? Not really.
Every minute.
An additional 2 cars every minute on a road. If you were to do that out here during rush hour, would you notice that?
Yes.
No, well, during rush hour, you might notice.
It
'cause you're
fluctuates that
already
much day to
upset.
day. What my point is, it fluctuates that much day to day,
Yeah,
2
yeah.
cars a minute. What we tried to convey is residential traffic, when you look at that, the total generation for residential compared to commercial, it's drastically lower.
Mhm.
So if just speaking solely from a traffic perspective, if one of the main concerns is traffic, residential is leaps and bounds better from a traffic perspective as opposed to commercial.
Okay. Eric, do you want to continue?
I can, they're very small, minor details at this point, they're not the big juicy issues. I've got 3 other things I would just point out that are changed. One would be just a cleaning up of a language issue concerning, the homeowner's declaration. You'll see that on page 8. Berks County recommended that we review and approve the HOA. I believe that's always been assumed, we made it much more explicit. And so the HOA declarations would provide you with an opportunity when you're reviewing and approving it to address things like whether there's parking on the private roads, things that are private, you typically won't be able to regulate, but this would be the opportunity for you to insert your obligations onto the HOA in that regard. On page 11, Berks County rightly pointed out that the board can't waive or modify zoning regulations, and so there's a provision here that originally allowed you to waive certain landscaping requirements. We struck that. Berks County, I view, is correct in that regard. Any modification or waiver of a zoning ordinance needs to go to the zoning hearing board. And so that's now gone. Page 13 is the next one, and this deals with the engineer's recommended parking spaces, but it's now obsolete. So if there's a consensus to strike the semi-detached dwellings and 2-family detached dwellings, etc., then the parking spaces become obsolete at that point. You don't need them. I cleaned up the language for the townhome parking spaces. If you look down, you can see some strike through in the new sentence there. It was unclear. It read 2 spaces plus additional parking at the rate of 1 additional parking space for every 2 required on site. I thought that was ambiguous, so I just said 3 spaces per townhouse unit in accordance with the section governing parking above. And so it's very clear, it's 3 spaces for each townhome unit. From the architectural drawings, it looks like there's gonna be parking immediately in front of the townhouse buildings. And if they can't get all 3 in the large spots up front, then they would be obligated to find spaces elsewhere on the site. So that would be overflow, possibly, not mandated, but they gotta meet the 3 space requirement there. That's all the changes that I've made since these last discussed in 2 weeks.
Okay. Yes.
How is the township protected with the default of a homeowners association? Like in Penwood, when Penwood rejected the homeowners association, what's the protection for the township in this?
How would we get that protection?
Well, the key is up front, and when we take a look at HOA documents before they're recorded, before the homes are even built, we want to make sure that there's mechanisms in place to ensure that the HOA is an ongoing concern, so that it has the ability to raise money and can increase dues when appropriate, but it's not encumbered or logistically unable to do that. And then there will be the right of the township to enforce the HOA regulations on the HOA itself if in the event, for whatever reason, it refuses to do so. And then beyond that, law would allow the township, in the worst of cases, to go into court and order a reconstitution of the HOA. I'm sure, few and far between, but I'm sure it's happened in the past. But first and foremost, we want to make sure that, and we will make sure that the declarations are written in a way to make sure it's an ongoing concern.
But that's not how it occurred, Eric, in Penwood, correct?
I don't know that
Well,
there is.
Penwood was never rejected. Penwood, there was an understanding between the builder and the township no HOA, but in return, they received a chunk of land to put their maintenance building there. So that's kinda how that worked out.
Okay,
Wasn't rejected, he's correct. There were 11 people, there were 11 homeowners that signed agreements that we met with the supervisors at the time, and they all agreed that they would support not going forward with an HOA for exactly what Mr. Whiteman explained.
Now, do I agree with that? Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's what
Because we're stuck with them roads for eternity.
You got
So that was a bad deal, so I don't agree with that.
that's all
Where-
I'm
where-
asking for the protection
I
in
agree.
that situation.
And that's why when this development came forward, there was no way we were doing another development without an HOA. No way.
There's a capital reserve piece that's also part of their review. That all the items that the HOA is responsible for, the current day costs of those items are put into a long-term spreadsheet, because we do them all the time. We probably, in the last 5 years, have probably done 30 HOAs, and we do with an engineered study of all the costs that are associated, and then you add an inflation number and you know, future costs, and that's how the monthly fees are determined for capital reserves, because the failure of HOAs, what we've seen, and some of them we've gone into communities that we've kind of had to rescue them, is the fact that their capital reserves are way undercapitalized, and that's where they fail. It's not so much the documents, it's more the dollars. And sure, they have the right to do special assessments, but nobody likes special assessments, so that's another important piece of developing an HOA.
okay, so we're gonna revise that. What's next? I mean,
We have two guys.
I still think it should be sent over to planning for them to know that, how many supervisors are in favor for this? And that they want, that this should be reviewed. I still think the setback should be 30. I still think we should have a conditional use hearing. And do we get to see what the HOA is gonna say before we?
Well, you would review and approve the HOA as part of the land development. So in other words, the plan would be released for recording, wouldn't be any homes constructed until you approve what's in the HOA declarations.
Mike, just to one point, you suggested about a conditional use. If what you're interested in is a public hearing with public participation, 609 requires notice for the public. Oh, I'm sorry, that would be the wrong section. Instead of going off this, let me go with that number. The PRD already has a process for a tentative plan submission that's reviewed by the supervisors as a public hearing for compliance with the ordinance. So you're gonna have a public participation process before you could approve the plan anyway. It's not the same as a regular subdivision land development plan that comes in, that gets reviewed in a public meeting, but you don't have a public hearing with testimony demonstrating compliance with the requirements. So I would really say that tentative plan approval process with a public hearing to determine compliance with the ordinance is really what a conditional use hearing would have been anyway. It's just permitted in the PRD process requires a public hearing. So it does exactly the same thing, it just has a different name. It's a tentative plan approval hearing versus a conditional use hearing,
So then
all for determination
we
for
should just go with
compliance with your
conditional use
ordinance.
hearing.
What's that?
We should just go with the conditional use hearing then.
But that's not what your PRD requires as it exists now, and all we've done is essentially lift the PRD plan language and put it in this overlay ordinance, so we're doing what you
So
already
you kept everything
do.
identical from the PRD?
We, largely.
So you got to pick and choose?
The setbacks, things like that, that's consistent, 100% consistent. The approval process, the submission process, the review process is all the same.
The conditional use hearing is to protect us.
But the tentative, again, I don't wanna argue, but I would say that what you have in terms of a public hearing for tentative plan approval, it's at a public hearing, testimony, transcribed, reviewed and appealable, it's the same thing. You would be changing your existing PRD to sort of change the process, because that's what we've lifted and used here.
In regards to traffic though, there's nothing stated in here about you guys doing any kind of traffic improvements for us. But you guys had offered to do traffic studies and possibly timing of lights from Morgan Way to Twin Valley Road. I mean, is that still stand?
There was some conversation between Mr. Brown and Mr. Hawes, to address that, I believe.
And I think it was in terms of a commitment about, to the extent that the traffic study requires, what am I looking for? Coordination of signalization along 23, then obviously we'll do that, because that's what PennDOT requires. To the extent PennDOT doesn't require that, we would contribute a sum of money. This isn't part of the ordinance, but this is in writing to Mr. Brown, that we would submit a sum of money that the township could utilize to, to further that. And that might be buying the equipment to make those kind of improvements, even if PennDOT didn't require it. You might want to, and I think I'm not gonna pretend I understand like Mr. Mounts, but, we had discussion about, you might need radio signalization, other kind of stuff, and that might go some distance for purchasing that equipment. But again, if PennDOT requires it, we'll do it. If PennDOT doesn't require it, we'll contribute money that, now or later you might.
But this is where the conditional use comes in, the hearing, to help.
Let's be clear on this so that the board has realistic expectations, so the public does. I think the board's appreciative of any offer that the developer wants to make, certainly, but that's not enforceable under the law.
Correct.
There can't be a contract or a quid pro quo when you are enacting zoning regulations. And so what this is simply just an offer. But the only way that the offer could be enforced, well, it really can't be. I mean, you're just going to need to follow up and address it in land development, but there won't be an opportunity for you to impose that as a condition, because the traffic improvements discussed are all off-site. So that would not be something that you typically impose through land development. And it's not something you can't write into the zoning ordinance. Now, as the discussion over the last year has evolved, there are other zoning tools available to you that would help memorialize any offer in writing during the, after zoning ordinance amendment, but before land development. Conditional use would be one of them. You guys do not have virtually any conditional uses. You probably sitting here have never seen a conditional use proceeding. They're a lot more popular, I guess, in other municipalities, other counties. The conditional use process requires a public hearing. It allows the board to impose reasonable safeguards and conditions on the proposed use, but it is a permitted use, and so if they meet their conditions, they're entitled to approval. There's more, I like them better than PRDs because there's a greater body of case law, and it's very clear to the extent upon which you're able to impose conditions. The PRD process also has a public hearing. When we say public hearing, that means there's a court reporter here making a stenographic record. There are exhibits, presentations, members of the public who reside in close proximity to the property have the right to intervene in those formal proceedings. And so the PRD has that same public hearing process as the conditional use process. There is the ability to impose conditions on tentative plan approval. In my view, the body of case law that really guides you on the extent of those improvements isn't as robust as conditional use, but it's certainly still there. And I would say in the event that there is a public safety issue identified during the PRD process, you go ahead and impose the condition to rectify that. In both the conditional use process and the PRD hearing process, you're still limited to imposing conditions to address only on-site improvements, not off-site. So neither of those processes are a cure-all that would allow you to impose a condition to improve signals off-site up and down Main Street.
But his light will have an effect on the other lights.
Correct.
So, that's one of the things that we brought up before is from Twin Valley to Morgan Way, those things ought to be timed right. And if you're gonna offer a monetary thing, I'd rather have it, I'd rather see it in writing saying you're gonna do that, but legally, we can't do that. I just don't understand. Sorry.
Yeah, so why we were outlining it the way we are, we are gonna have to go to PennDOT for approvals here. We're gonna need highway occupancy permits for access through 23. And all of those traffic signals along the Route 23 corridor are ultimately reviewed and approved for any modifications by PennDOT. So we're gonna have to go to PennDOT, work through the full traffic study process, design process to get those permits. That will inevitably include a number of intersections along the Route 23 corridor. And we'll look at the impacts and what's needed there. And yes, we have talked about improving progression along the corridor. What we can't guarantee today is PennDOT.
PennDOT says no, then we're done for.
And that's where we're talking about, if PennDOT doesn't want to either require it, allow it, it could be either of those, that we're talking about then making a contribution to the township for funds to be utilized that the township could make improvements that they're choosing to help with progression. I can't sit here and tell you this definitively. I would venture to guess PennDOT is gonna have us looking at that along that corridor.
I think everyone here drives up and down 23 there, that needs help.
This is a little bit of a different approach to this, but I'll throw it out for consideration. There's all kinds of funding from PennDOT specific to this type issue. They call it the Green Light Go program, which is specific to improving traffic progression, traffic lights, equipment, things of that nature. What I have seen done in a lot of cases, and if something could be worked out between the developer and township, an avenue may be, you can get a lot more bang for your buck if you could apply for a grant and get PennDOT to fund the improvements. In that case, in many cases, there's a 30% match, so you pay 30% of the project. Most of the time, that contribution up front can go towards that match, where you may be able to, if you were inclined to do so, try and get some of that public funding to do a much larger project, as far as you could not only improve progression, but improve signal controllers, for example, switch out some of your old signal heads with LED lenses, pedestrian things. All of those things fall under that umbrella. That's another thing to consider. As opposed to just taking an individual contribution, use that as a match to a much larger grant is something else to consider.
Now,
So
you can use Green Light Go for upgrades?
Yes.
Because I know we looked into it with 401 and 23 for a red light there. But if you get approved for that, you gotta come up with the money off the bat, and that was a major expense there. That
The
was
30% match is the tough pill to swallow there, but there is a lot of flexibility with what you can use the funds for.
But you're saying you're willing to contribute, and you're saying you're gonna put that in writing?
We have to put that
I think we have, yeah.
It's in an email to me.
But it's not a set amount, right?
No, I think they put 70,000 in the email to me.
That was the number we talked
I
about.
think that I forwarded that, and if I did not, resend it. Okay.
I'm not quite sure how much it's gonna cost to do that, but.
Well, I mean, it all seems like it's, difficult because PennDOT's not in the room, but between your engineer, PennDOT's engineer, Eric, you do the scoping, you lay out what you're gonna study and what improvements need to be made.
And I want to say, keep in mind, when we say we have to deal with PennDOT, the township is part of that entire process. So when we have our kickoff meeting with PennDOT, the township will be part of that meeting. So PennDOT will be hearing the feedback from the township at that meeting as well, before we even do the full traffic study.
Okay, well, I'd like to talk to Scott before we do anything.
I can just ask one more question. Gary, just so I understand this off-street parking, what you're saying is that you would have something in the agreement with the 7 acres, that if somebody built on that, they would have to allow overflow parking on that property.
That's what our discussion was.
Okay, I'm fine with that, I just want, so I'm clear, because that, to me, is a huge issue. The parking is huge.
That's why we had the discussion.
And that's why I went for 30 feet wide streets as opposed to the 28, because of the parking issue.
And what about the plowing? Not having a place to put the snow?
You mean if we had to truck it?
Let me ask you another question on that, based on that question. So let's just say theoretically, that a grocery store builds a grocery store in that lot, and we send all our overflow parking into their lot, how does that affect them for plowing?
Well, fortunately for us, you're looking at one street that parks on one side. We're not talking all those streets, as far as I'm concerned, because that doesn't concern me, that's HOA's problem. But we're talking from the dead end, it's up in Highcroft now, down to the intersection of Willow Glen and I can't remember the name of the dead end, but it doesn't matter.
Hunter's Run.
Hunter's Run, yeah. So
Hunter's Hill.
you're talking maybe 20, 30 cars max.
Have you ever plowed a parking lot?
I know you're gonna say that because that's what you do, and I get that, Jeff, which is why,
With 20 or 30 cars sporadically parked through the parking lot?
which is why I asked the question of how is that going to affect us
It's not,
as the board?
that's not our problem. Our problem is,
It's not, but it's gonna affect the grocery store wanting to come to our neighborhood,
right, so they won't.
so they
So now
won't.
we don't have it.
Thank
So,
you.
we either need to, well, I need to talk, should talk to Scott, our engineer, and then we need to figure out about these road dedications and the setback where we stand.
Why would we talk to Scott? Scott's already reviewed this.
And he has no other input, cause I didn't hear him say he didn't have any other input.
He's been in contact with you, correct there?
He sent an email, I believe the board was copied on with his suggestions. I don't know if he has more or not, I haven't talked to him recently.
And they were addressed.
Yes, pretty much, yes.
Sandy, I'd like to make some comments.
What's your comment?
Well, first off, early on, you said about sending it to the planning commission. It's been to the planning commission after a year of recommendations by the planning commission, and most of them, First Homes claimed they couldn't do because they need to make these many units on that property to afford to pay for the property. And basically, after talking to the consultants of the township type planners, they both recommended if you are not sure, don't do it, but the planning commission decided to not recommend sending it to the board of supervisors. But those guys on the planning commission, I think Roger might have 20 years on it. They are very good at looking at plans and evaluating, and they spend a lot of time looking at those plans and talking to the township planner that also attends every meeting and put a lot of thought and time into whether or not this is good for our community. And at the time, they decided, no, it's not something they would
Right.
recommend to the supervisor.
Well, up until this.
Roger supported moving it forward. That's not true, Alan.
I never said we didn't.
What I'm
just got done
saying
saying
is that if
Did I say
we're gonna
that?
go through with this and we do it right,
He has a lot of experience.
I wanna talk to the engineer and get his final say. And then I don't see a problem going back to plan with the idea that saying, hey, we have these supervisors are gonna say this is gonna go through. We need you to look this over and make sure we're not missing anything. Isn't that what planning's about?
The instruction that we got, due respect, the instruction we got earlier this month was that we were to, implement the changes that were proposed by the engineer made his changes, we implemented them all. We also got comments from your solicitor, we agreed to them all. So we've addressed everything that we were told to address.
You also bypassed the planning commission.
No, again, the planning commission has reviewed this since.
Is that ethical? I just wanna ask on.
There's
is
no,
that ethical?
nobody bypassed the planning commission. The planning commission is to have 30 days to review a proposed ordinance amendment, and they did. They had an opportunity to input, so did the county. The planning commission also has had an opportunity to review and work on either review of this kind of concept plan or zoning changes since October, November of 2020. Months of meetings, and frankly, it's a stall. And hiring the consultant was really about trying to find somebody who could essentially try to kill the project.
Okay,
That's
but
what
I
that is.
rely on
Not at
planning to
all.
do their job. I'm now having, I spent all weekend and most of my day, instead of doing my job at my work, studying this, going through this, making phone calls, trying to understand it, so I can't rely on the referral of the planning commission. So I'm saying I wanna make sure this is done right. I mean, I'm not an engineer, I don't read plans,
Again, due respect,
but
I
it's
think
my
it's been,
responsibility to make sure that I'm looking at everything I can to move forward.
we implemented the changes that were appropriate from county planning. We didn't get input about, well, we did get input to revisions and got rid of the apartments, significantly reduced the number of units. Again, I think we've done everything trying to work through the process, and I think if you don't follow the process that was agreed to last meeting, that we were to go back, have the engineer and your attorney review it to make any changes, we did.
And
We've
now
done it. I
I've
think
looked
it's,
at
I think
it,
it's
I
appropriate.
wasn't even
I'm
here for
ready
that
to,
meeting,
I
so
wanna
I didn't say
check with
that.
the engineer, I wanna make sure it's right.
No, so
Why, does
just-
it have to be
just
done
making clear,
today?
The request is that the board vote to approve authorization to advertise the ordinance, to have a public hearing next month, where we can go through this whole process again, what people's objections to it are. This is all about just taking the step to even have an ordinance to consider adoption of through a public hearing under the MPC.
Okay,
So,
well, I'm not comfortable
there's
doing
just,
that.
it's gonna be a step after a step after a step in terms of the tentative review, even if we did the zoning in place. Then it's a public hearing about whether we comply with the, the ordinance requirements. There's plenty of opportunity for input and review. And review the planning, the township and the county planning commission under the PRD get to review the tentative plan and the final plan anyway under the ordinance. So I mean, there's opportunity for input throughout this process.
May I ask you then, you said a month ago, you were told that if you made a few changes, it would come to this meeting. I wasn't here. I did watch a video, but I wasn't here, I wasn't present. So I would like to know who told you in this room that when you came back after making a couple changes this month, that we were gonna expedite this on its way?
To be
Who
clear,
made that comment? Cause I didn't see that in the video.
the meeting was February 8th. There was an executive session taken presumably to have discussion with legal counsel about the proposed ordinance and the process. And when it came out of that executive session, the direction was that the engineer and your solicitor were gonna review it, make recommendations about changes recommendations that were made, changes that were made, that were agreed to. So our understanding was that if we worked through that process, that we would then be at the stage to have the board consider having, authorizing advertisement of the ordinance for adoption a month from now. So was it?
I think it was Eric that was suggesting.
Well, sure. But again, so we implemented the changes that were proposed, due respect. So I think we've done I think we did what you told us to do last meeting.
I agree. We sent it to Eric, and Eric said that he was just gonna clean it up, some of the stuff that we talked about. That's exactly what was said. I know there's members of the board here that aren't in agreement, I get that. I honestly think that we've drug this on too long, and I mean, you guys can say whatever you want about me about kickbacks, I'm not getting any goddamn kickbacks for this. I can guarantee you that. I just know that I've been on this board and I've lived in this town, and I know what the bylaw said, okay? I was here when the warehouse came in, and I'm just stuck in my head, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna agree to an entire commercial area. And I mean, but let me finish. So the planning commission has been sitting this for over a year. You sit there and tell me that you don't want all commercial, you want mixed residential, but yet you don't wanna draw something up and you don't like the overlay, so make up my mind. What is it?
And did I not in executive say, you guys have the votes, I'm not a sore loser, but let's protect our ass, protect the community, did I not say that?
Well, that's
And
what we
do this
did.
right.
That's what we did. Eric spent all week on it. Did you not, Eric?
I reviewed it and made my comments.
Yes.
Yes,
So Scott has spent all week on it. Eric has spent all week on it. So how are we not protected?
because I would like to
You're not
talk-
protected because it's around your house. I get that. You don't
What
want
does
it.
that have to do with anything?
I'm sorry. I
There's
think.
3
I
votes
think-
for it, I have no choice, and it doesn't matter. But what I wanna do is make sure that we are doing everything right. Why is one more meeting or whatever? I never set a date saying we were gonna vote this meeting.
You just said that
Nothing
there
was
was
said.
mistakes made in Penwood, in the allowable process to be built, right? Narrow roads, et cetera. We could go over it all day long. You said that there was mistakes made, right?
Okay, you're on the planning commission, we're mirroring our PRD, right? The PRD's good anywhere else, why isn't it good in this
But
overlay?
who recommended that?
So wait though, hold on a second. So the planning commission has been good for all the other buildings that we have done over the last 20 years, but it's not good for this one? Why is that?
Really?
Really?
So why don't we have an HOA at Mill Stream? Why don't we have an HOA at Penwood?
Why don't we?
Why didn't the
Your dad was
planning
on the board
commission?
for Penwood, let's ask him, why don't we have an HOA?
Because they got a chunk of land. And I don't agree with that.
No HOA.
I mean, the township would have been better off buying a chunk of land than to pay for all them roads for eternity.
Okay, but your dad was on the board then, you're saying, let's reference this back to the planning commission, why they mess up? Let's ask your dad.
No, all I'm saying is that you guys, the planning commission has had this for how long?
A
If
year,
you guys
well
aren't-
over a year.
I know, and if you guys didn't like the overlay, why wouldn't you come up with some plans for something with mixed residential? With 50/50?
Yeah.
No, because you guys are dragging your feet.
No, we weren't. Why would we drag our feet?
Okay,
We wanted
Mr.
to
Biley,
get-
you're 80 years old, right? 80 years old, you've been,
It's taken quite a while.
exactly.
Why don't you find a buyer that buys it for the use that it's owned for? A buy
Well,
right.
that's irrelevant.
That's-
All I want to
that's
do is
irrelevant.
make
That's
sure
not
we go
fair
through this,
competition.
and I want Scott to be here when we do this.
Sandy,
What?
homes buy and sell in this community every day almost. We never have to see anyone vote to buy or to sell. But this property, every time, it's not a by right use that's proposed, and they're looking to put something in there that is not allowed,
I know this.
without us having to go through stuff.
So let me ask you this, the people that have the airport, did you make an offer greater than what Burke's Homes did to Mr. Byler?
Mr. Byler would negotiate it with us, and we would
That's not what I
gladly,
asked.
I would make an offer to him.
That's not what I asked. Did you offer something greater than what Burke says? I don't know what the numbers are.
Neither do I.
You tell us the numbers, we'll tell you if we did. We do not know the number. We were not told the number. We were told he would not negotiate, and we respect that. Okay? It's done. Okay?
Well, it does matter, because it comes down to us telling him who he can and can't sell to.
He can sell to whoever he wants to, I don't care if it's a landfill.
Okay, well, he
Were you on the
wanted,
board when the warehouse was going there?
yes, I was.
Did you tell him no, he couldn't do that?
Actually, I did, because I saw what the people wanted. The people sat here and said they didn't want a warehouse. Now, you wanna talk about this? I got 3 people live in Highcroft that are directly affected to this. So if the people in Highcroft are really upset about that, wouldn't it be a packed house of all Highcroft people?
That happened at the planning commission.
But okay, it's not like, it's not like they didn't know that this meeting was happening. There's light up boards in the center of town. It's all over social media. So we have 3 residents. One is on our planning commission who opposes the development. So I have 2 people from Highcroft and everybody else here is from the airport, correct? Correct? They have vested interest in the airport. Tell me that's not true.
There's 3 people. There's 3 people.
I'm just here for the
So
camera.
And we're sitting right here. 1, 2, 3.
Certainly, I love the airport, that's the most.
I love the airport too.
No, I'm not saying.
I love it. I don't wanna see it go, but I don't own the property. If it was my 56 acres, I wouldn't want these people up here telling me who I could sell to.
It's
It's not
already
who you
zoned,
can sell it to,
number
it's what it
one.
can be used
Really?
for.
But you were on the board when the warehouse came before us and everybody was adamant about no warehouse and they said development. Now here we got a
No,
development. You're never gonna make
I never said
everybody
nothing
happy.
about a development. I
Anyway,
don't even know where that came from.
Okay.
I think probably
So-
Highcroft people said they'd rather have a residential development.
you're
But
telling me the property values are gonna probably increase with the development over top of commercial.
no, commercial's
Really?
always worth more per
Really?
acre than.
But you never answered my
residential.
question of what do you wanna see commercial in there?
It's not
It could be
the same.
anything, a dentist office, health facility. Commercial is what allowed us in this community to keep our taxes so low over the years. We had the.
I'm not gonna disagree with you.
Commercial.
I won't disagree. Commercial makes more money than residential. But I'm not seeing commercial as being it.
Wait for the engineer to go.
I would
And
like
wanna
to
see
wait
the
for the
revised-
engineer.
That's not the intention we got last week. If you would buy the airport, and you would pay the money that they want for the airport, what would you do with the airport?
Within
I
the-
sure as hell would not build houses.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so, well, I left you know where I stand.
I make a motion that we move forward and advertise the plans.
I see.
And I we didn't even talk about the dedicated roads and the access, so you're saying you wanna just go with what they
I
have
wanna
there?
move the process forward. If we have a hearing next, 2 weeks, we can sit there and discuss a lot of this stuff at that point.
And for the advertising, it would have to be at least a workshop.
Yeah, it would
Yeah,
be-
it's 30 days.
Right, we need
Right.
2 weeks notice, so it would be your workshop meeting. March, that's what we want. And that would be for the ordinance as revised, so.
Striking those 3 things that we talked about.
Yes, that's all, that's not.
Okay, so you're saying we can still discuss the setbacks, the dedicated roads, nothing's been decided on that?
Well, I'm going to revise as we discussed, and does that include the townhome front yards? and-
The setbacks are following the PRD, which you're gonna have to change your entire PRD if you wanna do that.
Okay, so the answer is yes and no. Yes, you can always at the public hearing make motions to amend what's been advertised. If it's substantially revised, you would then need to re-advertise the ordinance again, so there's a cost issue, not a significant cost, but one nonetheless. So
And
the
what-
answer to your question is yes, the public hearing, you can make motions to amend.
And this public hearing, is this gonna be the conditional use, or when does that? Or are you
No,
saying you guys don't
conditional.
wanna do that?
I don't see any point.
Fritz?
I don't understand it, I'll be perfectly honest. I don't see a problem with the conditional use, but I don't understand what the difference is between the conditional use and the PRD. If one does the same as the other, then I don't see the purpose of having 2.
Well, we want, we have to choose one, we need to figure out which one is best going forward.
So if we do it, what have we done in the past, the PRD?
Well, Eric explained why we would wanna use conditional use. It affords us more protection, correct? Is that the bottom line, just summing it up?
I think so. It probably gives you a slightly better protection and ability to impose slightly more rigorous conditions. You guys have never had conditional uses anywhere in your zoning ordinance. You have had PRD. With the exception of XTL. Alan's right, you would implement it for the first time to allow XTL to build a 150-foot tower. Other than that, small difference, they're essentially the same. They're both with public hearings, both require public notice before those hearings. Both hearings are on the record with the court reporter. Both would permit an adverse, someone who's adversely affected to appeal that decision. So both create more public participation and process than a standard land development plan approval. In my view, conditional uses are more common. There's better case law out there to protect municipalities. But again, when you're weighing, the conditional uses would require that you fund the consultant reviews, for example. Typically, reviews are passed through and the developer reimburses the township under the conditional use process. You bear the burden of shouldering all of your fees. So there is pros and cons to both. I could lay them out in written form if you'd like that better. If you're more of a visual person and wanna think about it. I can't tell you the bottom line, one is better than the other.
Do you want it laid out?
Yeah, I do. I wanna see it. I wanna understand it before I vote on it.
Now, the hearing will be in the end of March. I could provide that information to you in the interim. Proceed with the hearing or not proceed with the hearing and wait until further study occurs.
You lost me, Eric, I'm sorry.
In other words, the motion that's on the table is to proceed with a public hearing at your workshop meeting in March.
Okay.
Do you want to proceed with that and get an analysis about conditional use in the interim? And then if you strongly feel that conditional use is appropriate, you just need to amend the ordinance at the public hearing. Or do you wanna not do the public hearing and save the potential advertising costs until you get more information about the conditional use process?
I'm okay with going forward with the public hearing, that's fine.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
You can do a roll call vote.
Okay, roll call?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Yes.
No?
Yes. No.
Okay. That's close for now. We done? Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, was a date given for the public hearing? Or was that
That workshop, did you say?
Workshop meeting, whatever. That would be.
Would that be the 22nd?
Okay, payroll transfer amount for ratification. Someone wanna make a motion to transfer?
Second.
Motion and second, all those in favor? Township office job ad for full-time assistant. So we need approval to advertise for help in the office, full-time position for Joan.
Second.
Motion and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Police department, ad for full-time officer. Motion? Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Police department accreditation program.
You have the information, as you remember, the DCED study was the recommendation for us to look at that accreditation. The training for it is the March the 21st through the 23rd. Being I'm a member of the PA Chiefs, we get cost at price. If the agency is a non-member, it's a $500 fee to enroll. Our cost would be $250 to enroll for the programs. The standards are 139 different policies that we may have to adopt. It's pretty much a cookie cutter policy book. It's accredited in Berks County currently. There are a few agencies that have it. There's 139 departments across the state that have the accreditation, and currently 375 agencies are enrolled in it. Basically, it's backed by, and it's been going on for 17 years, it's an accreditation program. Mr. Brown is well aware of it, and I think his firm probably would recommend it, stuff like that. So basically, I like to go to the training, which is 3 days in Harrisburg. The cost for the room is $102 per night, $150 for the cost for us to offset the registration, or that's the registration fee, plus the $250. I would need somebody, whether it's chair or a police liaison, to sign the agreement. We would have to do this program within the next 2 years. So basically, once we enroll, we do the training, and then you start with getting everything in place, all your policies and stuff like that. When you're ready, you do what they call mock assessment, where the assessors come into your department, look at your agency, check your policies, check to make sure you're doing everything properly, and then at a later date and time, they can come in and do your assessment. If you're assessed and you pass, you receive your credentials for a 3-year period. You would have to renew it every 3 years and stuff like that, So I would recommend it, like I said, it's part of the DCED study that was recommended for us to look at.
I was gonna ask that.
Yes. Trying again, look at using the DCE study that the board had used, asked, when we're looking at different things that we're trying to adopt and get in place.
Total cost for that is, it's $150 per person.
No, it's $150 for the registration fee.
Okay.
The room would be $102 per night. And then, like you said, contract says. So we're looking at less than 1,000, 750 or less probably, which would also cover, you know, that is also in the training budget.
And every officer goes to that training?
No, we send one officer to go, that would be me.
Okay.
And then basically, I spearhead, and then I have somebody that I train to become the accreditation manager that would assist us in getting the policies in place or written and stuff like that. And like I said, they give us a desk, the policies are all on there, we just adopt them, we put them in, bring the policies before the board, have Eric also review them, and they're adopted, stuff like that.
And the money's in the police budget?
Right.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion is second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Cody licensing.
With the change in the department and increase of personnel, we were at 11 licenses. That means 11 people, up to 11 can be on this system. We're over that. So right now we have one officer that's inactive for right now, so we could allow the new part-timer. I need to add 3 additional, that would give me 1 spare license for the Cody system. And we could use the funds for this through the rescue fund.
Just a quick question on that. If you hire somebody, are you gonna need that spare license?
No.
Was that, is there still, are you
So,
still going to have a
right,
spare?
still, right now, yes.
And we can use the
Rescue fund, yes.
I'll make a motion. Second.
Motion is second, all those in favor?
Aye. So we already paid for the Cody, you're just adding 3, right?
Adding 3
So
more
this
licenses.
figure right here is what we normally pay plus 3.
Right.
Okay.
Act 59 policy.
We're still working on that with Mr. Brown's office. You have before you some information on it, that we have to adopt that, put that in the form of a actual ordinance, or excuse me, policy. I'll have that ready for the board meeting, March meeting. But I wanted you to have a copy of it ahead of time so you can read it. This brings us into what was brought into law in Act 5759 in 2020. So we're bringing us into compliance.
Okay, rescue funds appropriations. Resolution 22-25, police vehicle and public works training television.
These have already been paid for, it's just for accounting purposes, I do a resolution, so.
Second.
Motion is second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Public works laptop and computer quotes.
Well, I need something. We gotta get, this is terrible. Did you look at laptop? I have no problem getting them small ones like that, but you said you were gonna look to see if we can get one that has capacity?
These are quotes here, or?
Well, the quote, I had given one previously.
That's
and
the
then-
one here, right?
Right, and then.
I should replace this one here.
Right, and you had asked that I look into the iPad, which links, I mean, they guide us for technical things, and right now, it's really just not a good option for your meeting stuff and accessing the network.
Can you look into a Surface? The Surface, Microsoft makes it, but it's a tablet slash, it's got a keyboard to it as well. So
This
it's
is
like
the
a mini,
computer that
that's
Gary
their
was
mini
saying
laptop.
was so good.
Okay,
So-
so, we have links, you know, I don't know much about technical stuff, they're the experts, so I will ask them about that. And maybe by your March meeting, I'll be able to solidify
Yeah.
something.
Gary McEwen said that they changed everybody over to Lenovo, which is, this one is, and this one, somebody else has one, I think. Chief, and these work great. So I think for the money that we paid for it, I think these will do the
That's
job.
gonna-
Are they touchscreens?
They're
No.
not, but,
That's gonna cost you a little less than like an iPad or maybe even.
yeah.
So I wanna give you all the options then,
Can we
and
get
then,
touchscreen then?
Well,
Now,
you could probably
my
get
wife
these in
uses
touch.
one, she uses a Surface and she deals with the Port Authority, so, I mean, they bought that for her, I mean, but she has great success with that Surface.
And it could be with the PUD connected and just how our server is set up, but it's gonna be a little challenging for us to go beyond this, but
Okay,
I
so
wanna
check
have
the
them-
surface,
I hate the
and then maybe just get the prices.
Check these and the Surface.
Yeah,
Well, what's on here is exactly what that is.
Yes.
Yeah.
right, so that they can get, and that's the option here, then we talked to Keith about a notebook that maybe a laptop would serve him well. And
Give
so,
one of these.
and then you have the desktop, which would be Pete's replacement for the fuel system.
Okay.
And, yeah,
And then, what about maybe if they had set monitors here
I like
that got
idea.
wired
I like
into the
that
heart
idea,
and we
too.
don't have,
I think that's a great idea.
The only thing with
now, I
that
still
is,
want this for my email, cause I don't want, you know what I mean? But,
so what is it?
the only thing I would say about the monitor, it's just a monitor that sits here and it's touchscreen and you put everything, basically it's driven off the hard drive.
correct.
The only thing I would say about that is, do we still rent this room out? Cause I would not want anybody in here with a
Well,
screen.
we'd have to not
with
rent it
kids
out
playing.
Well, yeah, I got you there, I won't argue that.
That would be a
The only
problem.
thing I could see, like, for, he's talking about, if you're using the same desktop, we wouldn't be able to open stuff up. We'd have to watch whatever, like, Joe's watching.
No, it's still
we'd still
your
have
computer.
We could have a mouse.
They're wired. So she puts everything on that.
We could actually
It's a
have a
computer
keyboard and a
screen.
mouse to still
Okay.
operate
There's no
using a
modem.
desktop, but
The modem is in
we
there.
just wouldn't have a case under here to go directly to the.
I think that's a great idea, I like it.
What
What is it? Yeah.
Well, it'd be, everyone would have a monitor here, and then it'd be hardwired into our,
The,
the server.
the modem is actually out
So
there.
basically,
in
they'd just be
closet.
running a wire somehow, and they'd have to get it over to the server, or Wi-Fi, I guess, but we'd have to have one box maybe out here. But then everyone would have access to it.
Okay. So you're talking techies would come in and do some kind of wiring in here?
It could be,
Ask Lynn
Bluetooth.
that
yeah.
if we could set up with a station here with just the monitor, keyboard and mouse. And somehow we all have access like we do with the laptop, except it'd be a permanent monitor here.
Oh,
And then everyone, I mean, the workshops could use it, the other part, Park and Rec could use
If
it.
that's the case, then these new computers, short of the chief, and any of these computers technically could go to,
Yeah, but
no,
see, I
because you
still
need these
need
for
my
email.
rentals. Yeah, you need these for out, but,
so you don't want anything that you would take out of here?
no, cause
No,
I'd
both.
still wanna use this for taking
Oh,
out,
you
but I
want
wouldn't need to
both.
bring it in. We don't have access because we know it's gonna run, cause it's permanently here.
So because of the challenges with these connecting, you want a viable option that you won't have that?
They would
Right, but
always
we would
work,
all just
'cause
come
they'd
here
be right
without our
here.
laptops.
Running off our
Like, so when you
server.
talk about even with like remember like a new video system, wouldn't they work as that? 'Cause
As
you
a
have
microphone.
camera
I think so,
and a
we could get
microphone.
something that.
Yeah.
Where like when you do the Zoom thing, each one of us individually would have our own little box
Yes.
up there.
Yeah.
And then these could not work at your
Is that
house.
not, that, I guess that's how it would work, wouldn't it?
We have to see if it's offered.
Yeah, I will have to have him, cause they work with other municipalities, so
That'd be
we'll
the only
see.
And if he has questions, have him call one of us,
Yeah, okay.
cause I think everyone knows what, the gist of what
I want a
we're
30-inch
looking at.
curve.
Right. with Netflix and
And a keyboard.
Well, if that's what you're doing, I'd like to get this and replace it. This thing's driving me nuts here.
Well, that's the whole problem though.
Yeah.
He takes that home for his email and it don't work. How's he get his email?
Right,
Yeah.
well, we still have to fix that, like I said, that, you can have that one and then we'll get you a new one.
Keith could
Is
have
that
a
how it's
broken
gone?
one, so he could put that right there. You can
Okay.
carry it around with
So
you and everything.
you'll check on
No.
the
Recycle
technology.
center.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
And then, are you okay then with us approving the quote for maintenance having a laptop for Keith and then the desktop for Pete, cause they're all outdated over there.
I
10
guess they
years.
need updated. Is there anyone
Their
wanna
fuel
make a motion?
system and the GIS, correct?
I need more RAM on mine for the
The
GIS,
GIS.
and the fuel system still
Did we
needs
finally get the
upgrading.
map yet or what?
Huh?
Did we get the mapping system yet?
That's what we're talking about. We've downloaded the software, but I need 16 RAM and I only got 8, so
So
what I
you
do
need
is
to
very
bring-
slow.
Let's do this, you come up with what you need,
Well, he
whatever
did,
it
it's
is.
here,
Okay.
it's in
That's
front
what's
of us.
there.
I'm not looking at it.
That's what Link told us we should be
So
getting.
the 3,423, that would do the desktop and also the ThinkPad.
Correct.
So we need a motion to get that, so he
I'll
can
make
use
the
it.
motion.
Okay.
So motion,
I'll second.
second, all those in favor? Aye.
And we can use the rest of
And I
the
still gotta
funds.
live with this yet, right?
Yes.
Well, now that you voted on getting him a new computer,
Yeah, you're
you're not
back
getting
another
one.
month. Okay, the 2022 MAA agreement, we went over that too quick last meeting, because it was getting late. So there's suggestions on here, the batting cage needs to be maintained by the association. Planting grass again, and a swale or something to keep the mud from impeding the walkway at Carnival grounds. Do we want MAA in charge of that, or
Well,
do we
that's
want?
why I just kind of agreed to just accept the contract, because right now, Twin Valley Legion Ball is trying to work with MAA about possibly, last year MAA had one team. So Twin Valley wants to see if they can just kind of take over MAA kind of thing, and if that takes place, then we can kind of get a little bit more stuff done, if you follow what I'm saying.
Okay, so these suggestions, were they in the last thing we approved, or were these things that we looked over and we approved the contract as is?
Right, that these were not incorporated.
Okay, so what you're
This is stuff
saying,
that the park rec brought.
I think, yes, this came from Parks and Rec.
okay, so we're good with it approved as it is,
Excuse me.
and we'll let this go until we
We
have
just
more,
need to address
okay,
these things,
okay.
I think.
Yeah, cause I didn't see that until after the fact, so I have to put it back on.
I make a motion to accept the MAA contract, but then we will definitely look into this stuff, because I know it is an issue. Keith
Okay, so
mentioned
we
it.
already accepted it right at the last meeting, alright, just want to make sure we didn't overlook this by mistake. Alright, Keystone Fire and Security Fire Alarm System Agreements.
They are working on some revisions that Eric Brown, had requested they look at. And yes, they're gonna make those changes. I'll have it tomorrow.
Okay.
So I'll,
Even the indemnity thing, the indemnification.
I think it was, one was the county, one was something else, the state. And then, what was the indemnification about?
Where the township has to indemnify them for everything.
Yeah, that I have to find
That's the
out.
bigger thing than
I'll
the
s-
other.
If you're okay, I'll send you what they forward to me tomorrow. And then, I'll bring it to you the next time.
Okay. Alright, disbandment of the 250th township anniversary. So Jack stopped in and asked if I'd take care of putting this on the agenda, that they're not gonna need the funds that are left from the 250th. With that being said, there's still books to be sold, so we'll have to take care of where that
We can
money
do that,
goes.
because Jack is still on the carnival committee, so we
Yeah,
can still
so-
do it through the carnival.
He said about donating that money to something that we need to send it to, so what do you guys?
Well, I said to Sandy before the meeting, I know Jack and I talked about maybe using some of that money about buying some, those 250 at just Caernarvon Township, 250 years old for the town. Now, how many, I don't know, but at least take some of that money and do that.
How much is there in that account, do we know?
$6,613.
That, and what about, for instance, signs entering our town or whatever, if there's any money needed towards them, because that represents our town,
What
which is
about
what
the
that
park
money is.
signs?
For park signs,
Or
anything that
the-
represents our
signs, right?
community.
Go up in Morgantown signs, we got them all done, or are we just trying to find a place to put them?
We're finding a place to put one. The one at the east end is still is the oldest of the three. It's down there, and it could use a rehab if you wanted to do that.
So, I mean, that's what that money was supposed to be for.
It's for the
So
town.
let's put it
It's for
back
the
there.
town.
Okay, so do we need a list of what should we?
How much money was
How should we
there,
park
and make
this?
us a list of where you think we could utilize that to represent our community.
Well, Joan, can you get, what were the price of them flags that are throughout town? Like the
It's
big ones like
about
that?
One with the brackets, if you wanna extend out, now we have 10,
225.
but if you want more, altogether would be about 190-ish. Brackets
So what do you
for
say?
banners, that size,
Oh, so
190.
yeah, we have plenty of money there.
What if we get 3 of them, 1 at each end and 1 in the middle?
I was thinking maybe a half dozen, that's what I was thinking.
I'd rather
But
spend
we
it
have
on
a
the
place
welcome
to-
Morgantown signs, to be honest.
Well, a half dozen, you're still only looking $600, there's $600 in there.
That sign
That's
refurbished
true.
is still under $1,000 to have
Okay.
it repainted.
I like the people go through town to see that we're 250 years old, put them every so often down through town, all the
What
way down
about a
through town.
toilet for that? I mean, we still have a toilet missing, right?
We can, I'm pretty sure we can make those improvements at the parks with some of the ARPA money.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have a problem spending all that money. So, yes,
Can we like add shade to the Friendship Park? Is there a way to do that, like do an overhang somewhere for the parents to sit there and watch their kids play? Sorry, I just.
is there even any room there for that park to put anything there?
The one, like a tree?
No, she's talking about.
Like a
county
pavilion
shade.
type of thing.
Pavilion, they make some sunshades for those parks that look just like the rest of the park equipment. And then they put a metal mesh roof or something over them.
Can we look into that?
It sounds like a Parks and Rec thing to me. I'm not that I don't want to, I'm just saying that.
Right, true, yeah,
It
because
would be
they're
a
gonna.
That would be a Parks and Rec item, you're right.
Okay, so.
Not a bad idea, though.
Well, how about, Joan, how about we get a
It gets
price on
hot
6
sitting
and
out there.
12, just to get an idea what the cost for those things, made up with a logo with our 250th on it? I don't know, do we come up with some like?
Well, how many years are we gonna hang 250th
Right.
signs out? That's
Well,
all I'm
I
thinking.
get it, but I mean, you know, the next millennial, what are you talking, 275, so we're gonna have them for a long time, at least they know we're 25, 250 years old.
What if we did?
Are we gonna have
like,
room to hang them with, how many, are these all going out next?
What do we have up for like Christmas? Nothing.
Never
We don't have
really
anything,
yet,
do we?
no.
So what if we did some Christmas banners too? I mean, just, I know that's a
Donated
year,
by the
that's a
church.
year away, but
I mean, I say we do a bunch of different stuff, you know, we could do all kinds of stuff.
Okay, so how about, where can we park, how should we park this to say? I mean, do you just put it in for Park and Rec, or do we establish
have to-
something to
Well,
put
maybe
it?
you do both, I mean, maybe you poll various organizations, have Joan work up a list, have Parks and Rec submit a list for your next meeting,
Okay,
and then you can approve a motion approving the list of.
so we'll put the signs
can't we
on
put
it.
it in our general fund under a subcategory?
Well, why don't
Well,
we just keep,
yeah.
why don't we just keep it that way? Keep it that way till we can come up with ideas on how we
So
wanna get
keep it
rid of
in
it.
the 250th, and we can just spend it on whatever we want.
But yeah, that's kinda what I'm
Okay.
thinking, that way it's already there, we don't have to make another category, we already know what it is, and we know that
That'd be-
Alright, so,
if we gotta tap into it to redo the signs, hey, that's where we got that in there.
okay, so on the Park and Rec's next board, or their next meeting, ask them for suggestions for some things that we have available money for.
Yeah.
And then we'll still use the signs that you came up with. You're not worried about the toilet, you can, I mean, if it's there, and you can use the
That
money for
doesn't
something
necessarily
else.
represent our community.
It does, when they sit on you, this.
So you want them to come up with some things that,
That they might wanna see done, and like the
along Main
suggestion for
Street?
the shade in the park, and maybe they can get prices on that and see what that would cost.
okay,
Just let them know someone was here questioning that for, over at the park. And then if anybody else comes up with stuff, then we'll add it to the list, and then we'll vote on it.
I think they're all great ideas.
Okay? Oh, that's one place. Okay, Friendship Park Security Camera System, next phase.
Is that me?
Is that you?
Yes.
So I had Baldwin come in, I have gotten 2 quotes to put, I'll use the word, a metallic traffic or light pole up at the parks, and they're prohibitively expensive. We're talking 10 to 20,000. So Baldwin also gave me a price of 4,000, 39 and change to put telephone poles up, and that was with an LED fixture on it. I'm still working with the camera people as far as if I dig in a ditch to take cameras and conduit, I wanted one ditch, and we're gonna put all the conduits in to get everything over there. But it would be nice to get these poles installed ahead of Vector coming out to put the cameras up. I'd like to install
Okay.
them on the cameras.
So does that qualify for the money?
mhm.
Oh, it doesn't, okay,
Yeah,
I was gonna say, if not, we can use some of this the 250 if they can
Well,
light the place.
the question becomes, it's your park, you're the supervisors and the residents, whether you're satisfied with telephone poles or whether you want a fancy metal pole like lighting up out your car in a parking lot out here right now. They're just,
Telephone poles last 25 to 35 years, as long as nobody hits them and clips them off. So, you know what I mean, that,
they're
I
brand
think
new,
that's sufficient.
they're brand new poles from them, so.
And I walked out with Keith and come up with areas that we kind of both agreed upon, which would work best for the cameras and also for the lights, so we kind of picked a happy medium, so yeah.
So there's, when I say that the camera people are looking for a 110 outlet, the parks are or the carnival committee is looking for some outlets and stuff over there, so when I say I want a dust to dawn light on the 2 poles, and then if I need a 110 outlet for the camera, if I'm gonna run some other power over, that's why I'm saying, I wanna, if I dig a ditch to take stuff out, I wanna put it all in. So I'm trying, the price is gonna go up till we get done with whatever we're doing. There may be a structure have to be built out there to house some of the cabinets, but it's getting the poles in so that they're in, or at least on order.
I would say, yeah, on the wood poles.
We need a motion for that?
I'll make it.
Second.
Motion is second, all those in favor?
Aye.
And then what do we do, just not to exceed $4,000?
Not to, do you think they're gonna exceed that, Keith?
The first quote for this is 39 and change, and that was for the light and the conduit. It is gonna exceed that, but if we only bury the conduit and some strings, we can pull the wires, whatever we need
So
later.
what if we say not to exceed $4,500 a piece?
I'm gonna tell
Yeah,
you
but
to go 6 if
3,900 is
you're
for them
comfortable.
to install the pole, right?
Well,
That was
there's-
with a certain amount of power. We're gonna add additional on if I'm digging.
Right, so that's a separate cost, that wouldn't be included in the exceed. Right?
you still gotta put conduit stub outs and stuff.
You following what I'm saying? If I'm digging, if I'm opening a ditch, if I'm
Okay, so
opening a
Baldwin's
ditch,
gonna
I
do
wanna
that
put all
also.
the conduits.
Well, no, he's gonna do it, he's gonna dig the trench from the hot dog stand out. They're pretty much straight across from each other, but it's right off the hot dog stand, we're gonna put 1 telephone pole, correct? And then straight across over right where our property line's at, right where we put the frost-free hydrant.
Right.
There's another pole gonna go over there, so
Okay, so
he's
those
just
are-
gonna dig a conduit over it, and you're just gonna
Right.
dig one trench, that they can put theirs in and ours in at the same
That's what
time.
I
But
wanna
that's
dig.
our expense, I'm saying we're approving for Baldwin to do the 3,900, right?
Their 3,900 was for electric to run the dust to dawn lights and install the 2 poles.
Okay.
And all I'm saying is while
You're
they're
gonna
there,
do
with the
outlets
ditch
too.
open, that was not for the outlets, that was just for their lights and poles.
Right, but you wanna do outlets as
I
well.
have to do outlets for the cameras. And then there's a cabinet that has to be installed over there, and
Okay, so my question is, are we doing just the Baldwin, saying not to exceed the 39, or 4,000 for the Baldwin, and then the rest is on us, that's just, you're allowed to spend.
Well, no, cause they're gonna put outlets and conduit in up the pole and stuff, that's
Baldwin
gonna
is.
cost, yes. Right?
at least they're gonna bury the conduit and stub it up out of the ground in that ditch. That's, the biggest thing
Yeah.
is while that ditch is open, I'm gonna bury conduit.
Okay,
So
so
if you can
Baldwin's
give me,
doing the project and it's
if
gonna
you can give me
exceed that.
5,000, that'll bury my conduit in that ditch and we'll bring it
Not
up
to
and stuff
exceed
out.
5,000.
Okay.
5,000.
And then what we'll do is we'll come forward with a resolution to keep track of the rescue funds, and
Okay.
it'll outline all of the expenses
Okay.
and the vendor. And Keith, do they need a deposit, or it's pretty much, they'll do the
They're,
work and then?
they're willing to bend over backwards to help. to
All
work
right, so
with
we got
us.
a motion and a second. All those in favor?
So it sounds like we have a new electrician with Baldwin then.
Yes,
That's good.
Yes.
Okay, Mavis Tires, looks like they cleaned up the tires.
Did we send them a letter?
What happened? Okay.
Terry did.
So, yeah, they were cleaned up.
It was just sent though, wasn't it?
It was cleaned up quick.
Yeah, they knew
I
it was
thought they had
coming.
word,
They knew it was coming.
they must have had word.
I think they knew it was coming, cause it happened like a
They
spark.
probably did it before.
And it was
the-
just sent today. Didn't we get it today or yesterday? There was no mail.
Yesterday, and I think it's
Oh, it was cleaned up
outlining,
last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
got
it
wind of
was.
it and they cleaned it up right
but
away.
it's outlining what they need to do, it's supposed to be fenced in,
Okay, there's like 4
This-
tires there as of Sunday when I got air in the tire.
yeah.
Okay, resolution 2022-23 Park and Recreation appointment for signature.
Yes, you all approved it, but this is formality.
Okay, so motion to sign it.
Yep.
Approve, second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Okay, great, show Walter.
Park signs for review.
just gonna get to them.
Somebody asked for pictures, so I took pictures all of them.
Yes,
And-
yes, so we can compare what signs, what we wanna match.
Yeah,
I can't open them now. Oh, there it is. Still getting errors.
I can bring them up on the screen too.
Okay, so working Morgantown Circle, hours of operation, 7 to 9. Yeah, we're gonna have to print these to look at them,
You want, I could
so we
get,
can compare them side by
you want, I could
side.
get T to do a spreadsheet based on each location and like
Okay, that way we
hours
can
and,
mark it and see where
you
we're
know,
like
like what
same
each
or
sign
different.
says, and then we go down.
Cause we wanna try to have it all the same, right?
Right.
Is that the- Yeah,
That's all I
okay.
do. Well, can we email them? That way we have a chance to take a look at them and maybe we
Yeah.
can talk about it at a regular meeting?
Okay, well, we have them.
They're there, all the
Yeah, I
pictures.
can't open it.
I can't either.
I did after the
I
third
can't
time.
either.
And, I think Keith wants us to consider the basketball courts.
Yeah, I got
Oh, yeah, you can't make them all the same, the best.
Well, right, I mean, try to make them the same until we have, you know, for
As
whatever
uniform
reason,
as possible.
as uniform as possible. And then, alright,
I'll,
we
I'll
have
get
those.
T to work on it and then
Okay.
have her send it to Keith
Well,
and he can look at
Just
it.
change the name at the top, right?
Well, they're all different. That one there that's on the board right now is Morgan Circle Park. There's one on each side and they're different.
Yeah.
Right, so we wanna try to
When
make them.
when I'm thinking parks, I'm thinking like the playgrounds. That's what I'm thinking. So I'm not even thinking Morgan Circle, but I got you.
Okay, so you'll get that spread over to us.
Well, it depends whether you live on top of the hill or down below.
Public Works, Berks County Salt Purchasing.
We had the opportunity, we've been purchasing salt through the Berks County Purchasing Co-op for the last 2 seasons. They reached out to the current supplier and offered them, offered it for next year, and they increased the price, so we had to go back with the bid. It's pretty much, tell me you're interested, tell me how many tons, and if you don't sign up now, you can't get in at all. So I put Caernarvon's name in the hat, we're not committed to anything, but it was, tell us now, or you
How
can't
much do
play.
you normally get?
How much salt? I put in for 400 ton.
And we participated in this in the previous
We've
year.
done it the last 2
Well,
years.
last 2
It's
years,
worked in our favor,
because
right?
Oceanport changed management or ownership.
Ownership.
And they really started giving us the runaround, so we did this as a fail-safe for the most part. We don't really like dealing with county salt, but we do, in a pinch. So I agree with Keith that we just do the bare minimum to stay involved in the program.
Yeah.
So it doesn't leave us with our
I
pants down.
bought it 100% through this county thing, but the agreement isn't through with Caernarvon, the agreement, because Judy Hopps right now, it's through Spring Township. Because they're the ones, their board is the one that's footing the whole thing, we're just jumping on board with them.
Okay, so do we need a motion to move forward with staying part of the Berks County Salt Purchasing Program?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Seal Master Paint Materials quote.
That's above my $2,000 limit. It was 10 buckets of white paint to paint traffic legends and 5 buckets of yellow. I can't believe that went up $70 a bucket in under 3-4 years.
And you're gonna put down cardboard and, you know, paint it nicely and not throw it
With the
away.
curb.
Not like the boat tub. Alright, so I'll make a motion for what is it, 2776.50?
Second.
Motion and a second, all those in favor? Truck 5 repair status.
I don't know that there is a repair status. I'm really looking for permission to take heads and pictures and have Joe put that up on municipal. We're not gonna fix it. There's no sense storing it.
What's wrong with it?
Fuel injection pump. 3,000.
3,000.
And we'll get on municipal bid about 5,000 if we fix it.
I was thinking closer to 3, but it's a 2000 with 150,000 miles on it. Doesn't look bad.
It's yellow.
I'm hoping you tell me to sell it, cause that's where I left the last
So what are we
meeting, so I
gonna
already peeled Caernarvon off of it.
Yeah, put it on municipal.
Municipal bid, I'm good with that.
Motion for municipal bid, second, all those in favor?
Aye.
2022 Freightliner lease purchase agreement for approval.
Nothing to report right now, right? For later, Keith.
No,
You do need, do you still need the option 3 approved.
We forwarded that to them, and so when they need the agreement, they'll fill in all that and bring it. It'll come back to the board.
Okay. Notification letters for right-of-way operations. So, I guess you wanna work up in the village?
The boom mower is, it was delivered last Wednesday. He has approved the use of that last fall, so I have it for a month. I'm working my way through the township, and Mountaineer Village is just a hot spot.
So I thought we were gonna, last year decided we were gonna put the notifications out early enough. That way, if they have questions or they wanna contact us,
They come in,
they can come,
yes.
right, they can contact the office. Isn't that what we discussed?
Yeah, well, that's why I suggested he said putting letters out, but we got that new sign, put that sign up there at the
Yeah.
entranceway. Cause I don't wanna
That
end
should be
up
put
with
up
what,
there, like,
I don't wanna end up with what
yesterday.
me and you dealt with and have, guys coming to the township building
So
and
do
putting
we have one
branches
sign
on
for
the floor.
one, yeah, we have one sign for one entrance, do we have signs for the other entrance?
No.
Any kind of signage?
I think that'll get around if it's sitting in there.
Well, they have their own
Can
Facebook
we
page, so I can
move it?
imagine that.
I could get it on our private page up there.
Okay, and let them know.
I just wanna give them ample notice, cause Sandy and I dealt with,
I know.
yeah. it
So
was-
if we put the sign up yesterday and then you put on there that anyone who's, can cut theirs within a certain time, they need to contact the township. Cause we told them that if they could cut their branches back, but it had to be done before we come through.
Well, I think we should kinda word it like, if, for alternate arrangements or something, please contact the office.
Yeah,
If you
that way
put
at
that
least you
on
know
there.
addresses.
And I'll get with Keith tomorrow,
Okay.
we can get some verbiage together, get it on our private.
But if everything has to be
Facebook
done
page.
before he comes through, I
Yeah,
mean,
Keith,
otherwise
why
he's
don't-
cutting it.
Why don't we put your email on that sign, that way?
So then push,
I was gonna
push it
put
out
his
as far as
personal
you
cell
can.
phone.
You have other
J and
areas
K
to work?
aren't far apart.
You have other areas to work before
You,
you
can
get up
you
to that?
do village very last before it goes?
I do.
Okay.
I mean,
That way you can
I've been
get the
working on
sign up.
Shiloh Road, I was on Morgan Way and Quarry today. There are others, but once I start getting to the east end, that poses the whole nother.
Well, you know what, we gotta give them notice up there, just to give them,
I'm
time.
talking out Hopewell Road.
Can we get the sign up
That's a
tomorrow
whole
on the
mess, I think.
website? I mean,
I can
is
get,
that possible?
we'll work on getting the sign up there tomorrow.
Okay.
You're not
and then-
doing the state roads, right?
No.
Do we still send mailings out if we're gonna do the light up sign then?
No. The light-up sign is the
That's
website.
part
that
of
we
it.
take
You're gonna do it on the
one.
Facebook page and
If
on
we
the light
do
up sign.
mail
that's
outs,
good.
we're gonna do it to everyone then.
That's crazy,
It's our right
spending
way.
money for that.
It'll get out.
Okay.
Put
All right.
sign up and be done with it.
And they'll fix the tax bill and throw it out anyway.
I mean, not, give them more than 24, 48, I mean.
Right, I figured like a week.
I have orange plastic signs that I can put up there temporary that says tree trimming coming, or tree work coming. And I can put those up on temporary, or on wooden stakes for that matter, along the boulevard, they're
You know
all
where
gonna
the
see
problem
them.
areas are, so I would maybe put a couple there in front of those areas, plus that light up sign.
It's all starts beyond the intersection of Chestnut Hill Road, no matter where you go, it's the whole village is a conflict.
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
they were notified, that's all I wanna say.
You can come down and cut in front of mine, I won't argue.
Well,
I'll point,
I might a
I'll
little
point.
bit, but.
How far back can we go is the question.
I'll point.
While we're on that, Hopewell Road is the next. Somebody give me some light on that, working inside my 33 feet and just trimming.
Yes.
I was looking, so I went past there the other day, Keith, and I was looking, some of those trees are growing out, like out over the street at this point.
I
It
agree.
has to be trimmed.
As long as you, all of us here know that we're gonna do that way when the complaint comes.
So maybe put a sign out there,
I can
one of
do
your
that.
orange signs.
I can, it won't happen until next week at this point, till I get through Joanna Road and through Thousand Oaks. I'll get Palmer Hill, Willow Glen yet this week, it's,
What was the price on that light up sign? 6?
No.
13.
13? Probably hard to get another one of those.
You can rent that too.
Can we borrow one?
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of them up there, probably, yeah.
13,000.
Yeah, right.
Okay, upcoming tree work, did you,
It's all,
that's all,
the
okay.
conversation we just
All right.
had.
So, 20 Penwood Drive.
This is the same lady that complained several months late last year, reached out to me again she still wants those pine trees to be taken down.
But they're not dead, right?
They're not dead.
Okay.
They're on our ground, but they're not ours. And I think that what I'm asking is, she's not gonna back up, so maybe we can just send a letter stating your thoughts, that the
But
board's
the
choosing not to remove those trees
stay.
until, unless they're dead, diseased, or dying,
Or in immediate danger.
or, well.
Okay, so,
Supervisor Fritz was there and he's looked at them.
If she trims those branches back off her fence, I wouldn't put that in a letter, but if she does that, that's her prerogative, it's her property.
Her voicemail will tell you why.
okay, so we should send a letter stating that unless these trees are dead or a danger, that they're staying.
And we're just gonna pay the bill when they comes down across the fence. That's what she's worried about, her fence.
Well, I get that, but if they're still alive,
I'm not saying that, I'm just saying, since they're on our property, we're gonna end up footing the bill for any damage they create if they come down, that's all I'm saying. I'm not arguing with not cutting them, so.
But if we,
well, that's what
yeah,
the insurance for, right?
yeah.
Oh, I agree.
And if we start taking down a lot of trees,
That's
everyone's
fine.
gonna be calling in.
Maybe up and down the road.
I'm not gonna have the
squatting on
township
trees.
paying for everybody's tree trim.
I'm not arguing, not arguing at all.
What we have to stop in this township is people planting in the open space in the right of ways.
But they don't have the right to plant on it.
Well, you know, that was brought up in one of the other meetings, and maybe we should touch on that, because when it comes to a shed permit, or comes to planting trees, or anything like that, how does Great Valley know where the property line is? I mean, shouldn't we have something in there that says that the property owner has to, like, survey their property, so
Or property pins that have been put
show
in by a
show our code enforcer a pin, so they can pull a string line, they can measure the setbacks. Because this is happening way too much, like even when you're talking about that walking trail where the fences are across the property line.
What about that retaining wall? I mean, that's $20,000, I don't know, 30.
It's a big wall.
It's a big
That
wall.
wall.
I know, but why would our code enforcer allow that?
I don't know that there was a permit for it.
Yeah,
That
but
wall
still.
is,
So how often are inspections done then? So what I think is,
Well, did we already give him the okay to look for stuff like that?
we told Keith that when you go do your inspections, make note of that and bring it to our meeting, bring it to our attention.
Yeah,
Maybe it would be a good idea to have Terry come to the next meeting, so we can talk to him. What do you guys think?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. We gotta do something, we can't just keep letting it go.
Yeah.
This is gonna turn into.
I agree.
Okay. Road maintenance agreement between Caernarvon Township and Honeybrook Township.
I met with Joan and Keith, we revised the agreement, so there's a revised agreement circulating. I really needed to get the final, I really needed confirmation that you're okay with it before I sent it to Honeybrook, they're waiting for it. So if we need to even have a meeting, I know if we need to have a meeting in between meetings with a couple of you.
If Keith's okay with it, I'm okay with it.
You feel like we're gonna be, it's taken care of?
Did we revise the short end of the stick? I mean, when we were getting the bulk of the roads, I
The
thought.
Honeybrook agreement.
I worked on it with there, but I think that, like, did you all read it? Are you all okay with what we're doing there?
Well, we're following the liquid fuels map, right?
Right.
So,
That's it?
but I think we need to address the liquid fuels, cause Honeybrook's taking the liquid fuels for the ground that we're taking over, but we're gonna waive that because of other stuff,
That wasn't Scott's perception of that, that was. Scott's perception of that was if there was money being collected, it's only a small amount, but over a long period of time, good amount of stuff.
we don't know what that dollar amount is.
I do not.
How do we find that out?
Yes, Scott.
There's gotta
So
be-
what if you leave the liquid fuels alone, like you're saying, just draw a line, okay, they're gonna take that, we're gonna take this, and everything stays the way it is.
Well, that's kinda what they did.
That's what we did.
That's what they did.
This
Why
is
can't we
already
just leave it
liquid
like
fuels.
that?
We can,
Because otherwise it's gonna get crazy complicated.
and it's something in writing though, we've never had anything in writing.
Yeah, and just put that in writing, I agree.
The biggest change for us is we are taking all of Mountain View. which before was in Honeybrook, and that's where the liquid fuel stuff comes in. The rest of it, Eric and I, the descriptions is the intersection here, the intersection there. There are pieces that are little slivers of Caernarvon Burks, and all I'm asking them, if I remember correctly, was they would notify us that they were gonna make an improvement to that macadam, and we would pay a square yardage to cover our section. I'd just like to see the whole road get done, and if
Okay.
by and large it's theirs, then let them do it, just give me 2 years' notice to fund it.
So then what about Mountain View then?
So then, if we're gonna cover our own cost for every inch of our property, then I think we should get the liquid fuels.
I
Scott
don't think
has
they're
some
opposed to
opinions.
that. It's just doing the paperwork.
That doesn't necessarily pay the bill, but holy smokes, with the fuel costs and everything, it's something. I mean, if we're gonna cover all our costs for everything that they do, then our costs should be covered as well. Fair is fair. Would you
So-
agree with that?
I agree with you.
Kinda like the way Scott said it?
I's group was worked with Eric to draw this up. I'd like the board to decide whether
Okay,
you're
so
okay with it,
My
cause
question is Mountain View. You said we're gonna maintain that road?
it's ours. By the liquid fuels map
Oh, okay.
of 2020, the road, that is all ours.
Okay, I thought you said it was in
And-
Honeybrook.
In Eric's defense, I would make that liquid fuels map that we're using for this agreement as exhibit A or B, because
Okay.
that way, when 5 years from now, if another map changes again, that's the way it happens. Every time that map gets reprinted, that line
Okay,
moves.
so it's fair to everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, as long as it's fair to everyone, I mean, that's all we want.
Yeah.
I say we go forward with it.
So,
Okay.
motion, go forward with it?
Motion.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
If you're happy with it,
So we'll schedule a meeting with Honeybrook people. Does any representative from the board want to be at that meeting, or can Keith, Joan and I just handle that with their solicitor?
I think between you and Keith.
I think you
can
do with
handle it.
solicitor, if there's an issue, then get one of us involved.
Gotcha.
Police pension adoption of Charles Schwab plan, resolution 22-26.
Anything special we need to know, or this is just
I don't think
adopting
we
it?
really have a choice, I mean,
It's just Joan thought it would be a good idea to memorialize the transition, so that there's a record that's easily accessible years from now if there's a question on when this happened or why. So the 2026 resolution just confirms what you approved last month, that you're transitioning everything over to Schwab and Conrad Siegel. And so that's what you'll see. It's based off of a model resolution prepared by Schwab. And so that's it for the police pension plan for 26.
okay, do we have a motion?
I make a motion.
Motion?
Second.
Second, all those in favor? Aye. Simple IRA plan.
This is where there's a question on this for resolution from you guys. So first off, I prepared a resolution with a non-uniform. It says, you're adopting the Schwab Simple IRA retirement plan for the non-uniform employees. No surprise there. We tracked down all the missing information from last meeting. So we now have the IRA adoption agreement completed, with one exception where we need guidance on.
I have to go get my plug.
Computer isn't having a good night with it.
No, he ain't.
In my office, there's the bag that I keep it in, so it's gonna be like
Oh, you got your office closed.
nearly like behind my chair. You'll see the laptop bag. Thank you. You can just bring the whole bag, Keith.
If you go to, if you're holding the agreement up, on the third page, there is a section for contributions. And part B, employer contributions, is a section that's gotta be completed. And so you're either going to elect to have matching contributions of up to 3%. That would be paid into the plan by the township, but only matching what the employee contributes on his or her own, up to 3%. So if an employee contributes 1%, then you would match 1%. If they contribute 10%, well, then you would match up only 3%. The alternative is to disregard that and make it non-elective, what they call a non-elective contribution, where everybody gets 2% contribution, whether they contribute anything or not. So I think in this case, Joan advises that you've got one employee that doesn't contribute anything. But under that non-elective scenario, you would still contribute 2% of salary into the plan on his behalf. So the difference really is, do you want a 3% matching contribution? Or do you want a 2% across the board, everybody gets?
Well, what did we have before? Did we not have?
You had a slightly off kilter system before where you were doing my understanding is that you were doing a non-elective, everybody gets 3% across the board. Schwab does not permit that.
Okay, so.
So it's either gotta go down from 3 to 2, everybody gets 2%, or you invoke matching contribution up to 3.
So that put us where we were.
I was gonna say, yeah, matching, because if the guy doesn't wanna contribute, why should we?
Yeah, we shouldn't do
So
that.
he would be the guy that ends up not getting anything at that point, unless he starts contributing.
That's up to him.
Right.
But right now, he's getting 3%, right?
Yes.
Yeah, do that.
Matching.
Matching,
Yeah, why should we pay someone that's not willing to do that?
Oh, well then, let's rethink.
So with that, everything else then, everything else in this agreement then stays the same as you have with Truist. You just need that guidance, so now you're able to approve the IRA agreements and the resolution.
Okay, are we doing any approvals right now, or
Yeah,
do we have to, okay.
you can do it.
Hey, anybody wanna make a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now,
That's for the resolution.
that's not the resolution, right?
Now you should approve the agreement.
Okay, motion,
I'll make a motion on the agreement.
Second.
motion is second. All those in favor?
Now, that's the matching up to 3%.
Right.
Yeah. And is there anything else paperwork wise, Joan, or is that it? That's the only two things in my packet.
Yeah, well, we have the letter of intent,
Oh, yes. Conrad's letter of intent.
just needs a signature.
I'll make a motion to sign.
Letter of intent.
Have a motion, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Zoning hearing board member resignation.
Yeah, he's moving out of the township.
Mhm.
I guess we have 3 alternates on the board already.
Things down to,
We can see
yes,
what-
there are, that's correct.
Okay, so we just need a motion to accept the resignation.
Yeah. I make a motion to accept the resignation.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor? Aye.
Can you confirm whose resignation it was?
Who's on the, who's moving?
Brian,
Mike Caernarvon?
it's Brian,
Oh, Brian Falcon.
that's it, Brian Falcon, yep.
Thank you.
Township complaint form received February 8th, feral cats.
Is this the same location?
No, this is Valley Pond, the other one was,
Well, Glenn.
well,
Yeah.
Climber Hill.
There you go.
So now we know where they're dropping them.
Yeah.
Those cats, they took up new residence.
Well, they weren't getting anything where they were, so they got to move.
Well, I think that's what happened. They're not getting fed, so they're moving. Is someone feeding them there? I mean, seriously, they're gonna go where the food is.
Can I
Probably.
ask a question on this? If it's Valley Ponds, isn't that a HOA problem?
That is an
It
HOA
is.
problem.
That's who sent the complaint in, isn't it? HOA.
it's an HOA problem, and apparently a board member said to the HOA, you need to take it to the township.
That is not a township problem at this point.
Unless it's on the main drag, which is ours, I think it's a HOA
It's
problem.
an HOA problem.
Eric?
Depends. I mean,
That's
stray,
diapers.
stray animals running through the township is arguably a public safety issue that makes it your problem.
but they're not.
If
running
they're,
for,
if they're straight on the private property, could you take the position that you can't do anything because it's private property? Yes. So it's probably.
They're on private property.
I'd probably start with maybe they should make sure that the residents are notified that they shouldn't be feeding these animals, and that's the only reason they really stay around. If there's no food, they're not gonna stay.
So is she the HOA president for Heatherbrook? So the manager for Heatherbrook HOA.
Right.
I compare that to snow removal.
Okay, so I was just gonna say the same
compare that to
thing.
snow
Do they
removal.
allow you, when you're plowing down the main drag, if you decide you wanna turn around, to plow through their development, you know what I mean? One pass through just to get turned around? It's private property. We're not allowed on it.
And that's a safety hazard, so why
Yes,
should
it
we
is.
worry about it? It's the HOA's problem.
That, at this time, I think it's an HOA problem.
I gotta agree.
I mean, the one out back here has been pretty much alleviated because they stopped feeding.
They've
And they-
also been evicted from the property.
And that wasn't in a development. That
That's
was
why
in a
they're not feeding them.
residence.
That's why they're not feeding them, they're evicted.
Well, that, and I believe somebody was relocating them.
To Valley Ponds.
I don't know where, I don't know where they got relocated. I didn't.
More specific,
Maybe we can
Heatherbrook.
respond to them, just let them know that, they need to make sure they send notice out to the community that they should not be feeding these cats or they will stay. And that, who's,
Well,
no one's
how
gonna
can-
relocate them, nobody, we really can't
To
do
make it
anything.
look like we didn't totally brush them off.
Well,
just
we're
tell-
not.
Well, I'm saying, that just maybe write a letter saying, hey, listen, this, right now, we see this as an HOA problem. If it continues, then maybe reach back out to us kind of thing.
I mean, there's a lot of programs out there already for them to do a catch and release,
Yeah.
right, through the state and the county, and like there's a
You can
Berks,
allow them to do
the
that.
ARL.
Well, yeah.
That's what, so in my mind, that's what I was thinking that we're talking about, is they need to go through the process of elimination in their HOA.
We could provide them that sergeant's name from ARL, Sergeant, Carroll, who
He's the one
was
that referred.
helping us over here on Wells Lane
Was it,
with the situation.
We had that girl called in, she had all kinds of answers, didn't she? All kinds of different places to call. Did we ever look into any of that stuff?
Yes, some of it, and some of it did pan out.
Okay. Yeah, I think that works. Send them all the information and say, hey,
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I'm not trying to be ugly, but if it's not our problem.
well,
yes, you are, Keith.
can we get his email out on that?
okay, 3011 Best Road, reaffirm plan approval and sign plans.
Plans
It's
are in
not
the
the
back.
one here that I got, but,
Yeah, the plans are in the back of the room. They were approved many months ago, so they have to be reaffirmed. Lancaster County did sign them, cause that was part of the, whatever they were
Is this
dividing.
just a lot line change?
Yes.
Yes, for the residents, or,
So the only thing you wanna make sure is that they've paid all the review fees off and there's no balance owed.
okay, so do we do that first, then we'll,
You can make the motion to affirm and re-sign, subject to a zero balance. And then Joan just holds it until they come in with a check to pay it off.
I'll make a motion or whatever.
what he said, I'll second.
motion second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and we do have an executive.